You arrive before sunrise. It's cold, but not the dramatic kind of cold that howls through pine forests. This is a quiet, damp cold, the kind that seeps into your sleeves and makes you briefly regret the choices that brought you here. You're standing in a cloister barefoot because you're a monk now, or at least you've slipped into the sandals of one. Welcome to the 14th century. No one asked you if you packed snacks. The sky above the stone archways is a soft bruise of blue and gray. You hear the faint rustling of woolen robes. Others are already awake. Of course they are. The bell rang hours ago, marking the midnight office of matins, and then again for lauds before dawn. Time here is measured not in clocks, but in prayers, in a rhythm so slow it could almost lull you into believing that nothing urgent has ever happened in this world. You shuffle toward the chapel, the hem of your robe whispering across the wet flagstones. Incense hangs in the air like an old secret. The stone walls absorb all sound except the echoes of your own soft breathing. The monk beside you coughs. You wince. Coughs these days are suspicious. Plague lingers like a jealous ghost. Here's a cheeky little warning. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because anything terrible happens, unless we count the turnip soup, but because this life is slow. Very slow. Snoozing through your own chores slow. But don't worry, just relax into it. That's kind of the point. If you're enjoying this gentle spiral into the mundane, consider liking this video and subscribing for more boring histories. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. We'll be awake here, perpetually. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. Your day begins with silence. Not the empty silence of a quiet room, but the full-bodied silence of collective restraint. 30 men with shaved crowns and cold hands sit without speaking, facing forward. You are one of them. Your thoughts drift, as thoughts do when you're hungry and slightly damp. You pray. Again. You chant words you mostly understand in Latin you definitely don't. Ora et labora. They say, pray and work. Simple. Repetitive. Slightly guilt-inducing. Very on-brand for the Middle Ages. The abbey is nestled in a region that modern maps would place somewhere in southern France. Back then, just land. Cold land. Your field. Monks lived largely self-sufficiently, which is a romantic way of saying, you farm, you eat, and you pretend the cabbage isn't full of beetles. Today you've been assigned to the scriptorium. Lucky you. You get to copy manuscripts by candlelight, which sounds aesthetic until you realize the candles are made of tallow and smell like boiled sheep fat. But this is prime real estate compared to stable cleaning or latrine scraping. You dip your quill, scratch ink into parchment, and try not to sneeze. You fail. Someone glares at you. There's always a hierarchy, even in heaven's waiting room. Outside, the land is quiet. A few peasants till the fields under a wet sky. You're not allowed to speak to them unless you're the designated lay brother. You are not. You're the designated copy this sermon for the 5th time this winter guy. A major historical fact for you to chew on, between yawns. By the 1300s, monastic communities were among the few centers of literacy and book production in Europe. That's right. Your sleepy doodles on the margins of today's Psalms might accidentally survive 8 centuries and get analyzed in a future thesis titled The Smiling Donkey of St. Jossie Abbey, a marginalia mystery. Don't laugh. That actually happened. Historians still debate whether the monk meant the donkey to look smug or joyful. Medieval sarcasm is a scholarly gray zone. Now, for your obscure tidbit of the evening. In some abbeys, monks were forbidden from laughing out loud. Yes, even holy chuckles were policed. Too much laughter was seen as the devil tickling your humility. So yes, you're spiritually endangered every time Brother Auric trips over his robe and you snort into your sleeve. Your stomach growls. This signals that lunch, or as it's called here, refectory time, is approaching. Spoiler alert, it's bread, thin soup, and maybe beans if someone's been especially saintly. You sit at a long table under a high vaulted ceiling. You do not speak. One monk stands and reads aloud from the life of Saint Benedict while everyone chews in silence. He stumbles over a word. You feel embarrassed on his behalf, which is an emotional luxury you don't get often here. The meal ends with a prayer. You rise, bow slightly, and return your wooden bowl. Everything echoes here. Your footsteps, your thoughts, even your small regrets. Outside, the rain has begun. Again, you walk the cloister walk, the same 87 steps you walk every day, bordered by carefully trimmed hedges and stone columns, worn smooth by centuries of habit. Remember the cloister from earlier? It's back. Like most things here, it never really left. Time stretches. Your breath fogs in the cold air. You think about how everything smells faintly of beeswax and old wool. You think about the rats. Oh yes, the rats are a fact of life. Plague or not, they're part of the scenery. They dart across the granary floor with the entitled confidence of creatures that know they'll outlive you. You pass the herb garden. Sister Constance, yes, there's a small nunnery nearby. Once sent over some horehound for tea. It tasted like regret and damp nettles, but it helped with coughing, apparently. By late afternoon, you're assigned to the fish pond. You scatter feed. The fish do not care about your efforts. They live better than most peasants. You try not to envy a carp. Another fact floats into your mind, uninvited but persistent. The Black Death wiped out nearly half the population of Europe by 1350. You pretend not to think about it. After all, monks believe in the afterlife. But you're not in a rush. The sun dips low. Bells toll. The day slows even further. You return to the chapel. More chanting. You barely notice your voice anymore. It has become part of the echo. You sit. You breathe. You exist. And that here is enough. You blink slowly. The wind nudges through the stone corridors. The fire in the kitchen guttered out long ago. You wake up before you meant to. A rooster crowed somewhere, despite no one remembering who owns a rooster. You shift on your straw-stuffed mattress. It's not comfortable, but at least it's dry. Mostly. You sit up. Your breath clouds in the air. A spider in the corner is doing better than you, building a web with purpose. You consider asking for career advice. The morning bell rings. You sigh the sigh of a man who knows exactly how many hours until the next sigh. You light a rushlight, careful not to set your robe on fire. Again, you head to prime, the early morning prayer. There are 7 canonical hours in your day, and none of them include naps. That's the real medieval cruelty. The chapel smells like stone and rain and a little bit of hope. You kneel, say the words, and try to keep your mind from wandering. You fail. Your thoughts drift to breakfast. Porridge again. Always porridge. Sometimes with a hint of apple if Brother Gerard is feeling generous or mischievous. No one quite trusts Gerard's idea of spice. After breakfast, it's time to illuminate. No, not your soul. A manuscript. You're back in the scriptorium, but today, you're adding decoration. Gold leaf. Tiny red dragons. You don't know who invented marginalia, but you hope they were rewarded with extra honey cakes. Here's your historical fact for the morning. Illuminated manuscripts weren't just pretty. They were incredibly expensive and time-consuming, often taking months or years to complete. A single Bible could cost more than a house, which is ironic, since you're probably copying it in a room without a roof that doesn't leak. Today's strange tidbit? Some monks believed that certain pigments had spiritual properties. Red for the blood of martyrs, blue for the Virgin's robe, and green, well, no one's quite sure. Some said it symbolized life. Others said envy. One monk in York used it only to color the eyes of snakes. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic, or if he just had a flair for drama. You pause to stretch your fingers. Cold ink stains your knuckle. Your candle guttered out. You borrow Brother Hugo's. He nods once, wordlessly. That's practically a love letter, by monastic standards. Midday brings more prayers, more bells, more soup. You swallow quietly, while another monk reads from the dialogues of Gregory. You listen without really hearing. The wind hums against the walls. Someone farts. It is the loudest sound of the day. No one flinches. You respect that. The monastery kitchen is a curious place. A low building with a heavy oak door. It always smells like burning onions. The cook, Brother Renatus, has 3 fingers and no patience. He says very little, but his broth says plenty. Some suspect he was a mercenary before he found faith. Others think he's just angry about turnips. Your afternoon task is tending the bees. Yes, you're a beekeeper now. You wear a woven hood, not unlike a basket for your head, and approach the hives with the calm of a man who's already been stung 12 times this week. You whisper a psalm, not for protection, just because it feels polite. A monk once claimed the bees responded better to Gregorian chant. That monk also tried to baptize a goat. So, interpret that however you like. You watch the bees dance. Their whole life is buzzing, building, repeating. You feel a kinship. Maybe they pray, too, in their own way. You carry a small pot of honey back to the kitchen. A luxury. Tonight's feast day might just include it in the oatcakes. You pass the same cloister walk again. The hedges are trimmed. The sky is slightly less gray. You wonder what the world looks like beyond these walls. Then you remember, most monks never traveled more than a few miles from their abbey their entire lives. You blink. A bell tolls. Time for vespers. Another prayer. Another chant. You wonder if the Virgin Mary ever tired of hearing her own name sung in monotone. Probably not. She has more patience than you. The light fades. You feel it rather than see it. You walk slower. Breathe deeper. You exist in rhythms now, not hours. There's a quiet comfort in that. You close your eyes in the chapel. Just for a moment, a moth flits near the candle. It's the most drama you've seen all day. You do not dream. Or if you do, they're the kind of dreams shaped like chants and flickering candles. Half-thoughts drifting through dim corridors. You wake in darkness again. It's Compline, the final prayer of the day, and the beginning of the silence that lasts until morning. But you're already up. A storm has started. Nothing dramatic. Just a low moaning wind nudging the old wooden shutters, like a tired ghost rehearsing complaints. You're still wrapped in your rough wool blanket, one leg slung over the edge of the cot, considering whether getting up is worth the effort. It's not, but you do it anyway. That's monk logic. You fast, you chant, you get splinters from kneeling on old wood, all in the service of something higher. Though frankly, at this hour, higher purposes feel a little abstract. You light a beeswax candle, which smells faintly of burned sugar and damp linen, and make your way toward the night vigil. You don't say much, no one does, but you feel the weight of centuries moving with you. Same steps, same sighs, same slow procession toward the chapel, barefoot and bleary-eyed. You take your seat. Another bell tolls. You bow your head, trying not to fall asleep in the third psalm. Your mind wanders. Again. This time, it lands on cheese. Someone mentioned last week that the cellar cheeses are beginning to grow a rind so thick it might count as structural support. It was a joke, but not entirely. Today is Tuesday. Not that it matters much. Every day here feels a little like Sunday, a little like Wednesday, and a lot like oatmeal. But there's something comforting in that sameness. A steady loop, like walking in circles and pretending you're making progress. Now, here's your major historical fact to drift on. Monastic silence wasn't always absolute. There were specific exceptions, emergencies, liturgical duties, or talking while laboring if absolutely necessary. In some abbeys, a designated sign language of the cloister evolved. A flick of the fingers could mean water, bread, or I deeply regret volunteering for latrine duty. Your own gestures lately have mostly involved shrugging and pointing at leaky ceilings. As dawn inches forward, the storm eases. You're assigned to the gardens today. Lucky again, depending on your feelings about root vegetables. You grab a dull spade, tie your robe higher, and trudge outside. The wind has left everything smelling of soil and ash. Someone burned the weeds again. You spot Brother Petrus already out there, poking at a row of onions like he suspects they're plotting against him. The garden is the quietest part of the abbey, which is saying something. You hear bees, distant hooves, the creak of the well, and your own stomach, still protesting the concept of humility through fasting. It's not a glamorous life, but it's one of purpose, even if the purpose is mostly, don't let the spinach die. As you dig, you find a stone shaped like a heart. You put it in your robe pocket. Why not? Little treasures are allowed. By mid-morning, it's time for terce, the third canonical hour. You brush off your robe, leave the onion field to its fate, and return to the chapel. You chant. You kneel. You try not to think about your knees. You fail. Then, miracle of miracles, Bath day. Yes, the monastic calendar includes scheduled bathing, but before you get excited, it's once every 2 weeks, and even that depends on the season, the mood of the prior, and whether anyone remembered to heat the water. Bathing is communal, brisk, and suspiciously theological. Naked humility, they call it. You mostly call it cold. Still, there's something refreshing about scraping off 3 layers of spiritual dust. You dry off with a piece of cloth that's seen better centuries, get dressed again, and return to your cell. Here's your weird cultural tidbit. Some monasteries used leech therapy for cleansing the body. Yes, leeches. On purpose. For the sake of balance, of course. The medieval concept of health involved balancing the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Leeches were like tiny, wriggling accountants for your bodily economy. You never liked them. Neither did Brother Felix, who once fainted at the sight of one. The leech was fine. Later, you're given a parchment to carry to the priory across the valley. This is a treat, a sanctioned walk. You head out along the dirt road, past fields and low stone fences, past a suspiciously angry-looking goat. The wind hums. A bird chirps once, then regrets it. As you walk, you notice something strange, a smooth, white stone halfway buried in the mud. You dig it out. It's carved, not by a monk. A face, a pattern, you're not sure. Historians still debate whether such roadside carvings were remnants of pagan charms, lost love tokens, or just medieval graffiti. You put it back. You already have a heart-shaped rock. You return before sunset. You feel lighter. A walk does that, even in robes. Evening settles again. The candles are lit. The bells toll. The cycle continues. You think, I could do this again tomorrow. You know, you probably will. You begin the day not with a jolt, but with a long, reluctant blink. The bell rings again, and you wonder if there's a single corner of this abbey where that sound can't find you. Probably not. Sound travels strangely in stone buildings. It ricochets off the vaulted ceilings like a pigeon that's had too much barley. You swing your legs over the cot. Your toes meet the floor, which is approximately the temperature of last week's soup. You mutter a psalm, not out of piety, but because your joints are making noises that can only be soothed with scripture or herbal tea. You don't have herbal tea. Today is not your day in the scriptorium or the gardens. Today is laundry duty. You make your way to the small wash house by the stream, carrying a sack of soiled robes and an expression of cautious resignation. The monks call it the fuller's house. You call it the place where dignity goes to dry. The sky is overcast again, because of course it is. You kneel beside the icy stream and plunge the first robe into the water. It stiffens instantly. So do your fingers. You beat it against a flat rock, like generations before you. Some monks do this prayerfully. You do it with the slow fury of a man who knows exactly how long it takes wool to dry. Still, there's a rhythm to it. Swish, beat, squeeze, repeat. A kind of meditative violence. You begin to hum. Not a chant, just something you vaguely remember from a village fair in your pre-monastic life. Something with fiddles and dancing and people who spoke louder than a whisper. The memory flickers, then fades. Here's your big historical morsel for the day. Monasteries were centers of hygiene in a filthy world. Medieval monks bathed more often than the average layperson, and many abbeys had running water systems, drainage, even primitive toilets. Not exactly luxurious, but better than the neighbor's dung heap. And your weird detail. Some monks made their own soap, using urine-soaked ash mixed with animal fat. It was called lye soap, and yes, it worked. Kind of. Smelled like judgment, though. You hang the wet robes on a line stretched between 2 gnarled apple trees. One of them creaks ominously in the wind. You back away. Trees, like saints, deserve respect. You're not alone out here. Brother Clement is tending to the chickens nearby. He talks to them like they're his cousins. One of the hens appears to respond. You're not sure who's winning the conversation. By midday, you're called back in for the nun prayer. You wring out your robe sleeves, wipe your hands on a stone, because towels are not a priority in this century, and join the others in the chapel. The air is thick with candle wax and unspoken fatigue. You chant. You kneel. Your knees are plotting rebellion. Lunch today is rye bread, onion stew, and a strange lump that might be cheese, or might be hope. You eat it anyway. Across the table, Brother Oswin stares into the distance like he's seen something unspeakable. Probably the cheese. No one talks, of course, but someone drops a spoon, and that sound alone feels like a scandal. It echoes dramatically, like a bad omen. You all pretend not to notice. After the meal, you help wash the bowls. They're made of wood, slightly cracked and eternally damp. You wonder if the bowls have dreams. You hope they dream of being warm. Then comes manual labor hour, which is somehow different from the rest of the labor. Today you're helping to mend the thatched roof of the pigsty. The prior says this builds character. You suspect it builds tetanus. As you climb the short ladder with a bundle of reeds, you spot a line of pilgrims walking the road just beyond the abbey walls. Travelers, dusty, sunburned, probably lice-ridden, but still, pilgrims. You wonder where they've come from. Canterbury, Santiago, or just the next village over. Historians still debate whether such short pilgrimages were acts of true piety or just elaborate excuses to get a change of scenery and barter for sausage. Either way, they're walking. You're patching pig shelters. You finish before the sun sinks too low. The roof still leaks in the middle, but it's better than before. You consider that a win. You pass the fish pond again on your way back. The fish ignore you. As usual, you wave at them anyway, because stubborn friendliness is one of the few joys left to you. Back in your cell, you sit on the cot. You pull out the heart-shaped stone from your robe pocket and set it on the windowsill. It looks vaguely holy in the evening light. You decide to keep it, and then the bell rings again. It always does. You go to Vespers. You pray. You close your eyes. You open them again in the dark. You breathe. The night waits for you. You are dreaming of cabbage. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Just a plain, green, slightly overboiled cabbage. It sits on a wooden plate, steaming gently, and you're staring at it like it holds the secrets of the universe. Then, just as you're about to take a bite, the bell rings. You wake up to darkness and the faint smell of old straw. The cabbage is gone. The secrets of the universe remain frustratingly unchewed. It's still early, or late, or that ambiguous pocket of time monks call matins, when the world is hushed and the only thing stirring are your own thoughts and maybe a rat or two in the granary. You light your candle. The wick hisses, resentful at being disturbed. You feel the same. As you shuffle down the corridor in your robe and sandals, you pass Brother Aldwin, who has perfected the art of walking without making a sound. You suspect he might actually hover. He nods. You nod. It's a deeply meaningful exchange. You both continue on, ghosts and wool. The chapel is cool and dim. Candles flicker along the altar. Their glow makes the gold leaf on the manuscript stand out like fireflies trapped in vellum. You take your place and begin the psalms. Chanting this early feels like humming into a cave. Hollow, echoey, slightly haunted. Today, you hit the 5th psalm before realizing you've been singing the wrong one. No one corrects you. You appreciate the silence of mercy. Here's your major historical fact. Many medieval monasteries maintained their own astronomical charts to help keep time for prayer. Stars, sun, and shadow, all calculated carefully, so you always knew when to rise, chant, or regret not sleeping more deeply. Of course, this isn't an exact science. Historians still debate whether monks truly understood celestial movement or just made educated guesses while squinting into fog. Either way, the bell rings when it rings. After matins, you return to your cell, but sleep doesn't come. Instead, you sit at the tiny desk beside the narrow window. You look out into the blackness, hear the soft clatter of rain on slate, and feel the world holding its breath. By the time the next bell chimes, you're already dressed and ready. Today's task, herbal work. You head to the small apothecary tucked behind the kitchen, where jars of dried plants line the shelves like dusty trophies from a very gentle war. Brother Nivard greets you. He's hunched, half-deaf, and smells permanently of rosemary. He motions for you to help crush dried valerian root. You oblige, carefully grinding the brittle pieces into powder using a stone mortar. According to lore, And Brother Nivard, valerian soothes the nerves, wards off bad dreams, and maybe even repels demons. Or cats. The records are unclear. Your obscure tidbit of mourning? Some monks believed that leeks could cure nosebleeds if recited over in Latin while facing east. The leek must also be blessed, and slightly boiled. You assume this helped precisely no one, but it did make for fascinating conversation at dinner, if anyone had been allowed to talk. After you bottle the valerian powder, Brother Nivard rewards you with a chunk of candied ginger. It's sharp, sweet, and possibly the most excitement your mouth has experienced in 3 weeks. Next comes terse, then garden duty. You're tasked with pruning the raspberry bushes, which is only mildly dangerous. The thorns draw blood with the casual efficiency of a trained scribe. You mutter a complaint to the birds. They do not care. Lunch is turnip stew with a suspicious chunk of something. You eat it anyway. Hunger makes brave souls of us all. During the afternoon, you're summoned by the prior. You panic slightly. Have you misplaced a scroll? Overwatered the basil? Made your chant too jazzy? No, he simply wants help repairing the abbey wall, where some stones have collapsed after last week's storm. You nod and grab a trowel. The wall isn't tall, but it's old. Older than most of the town beyond, built back when Vikings still occasionally dropped by to redecorate the coastline with fire. You place each stone carefully, pressing mortar with slow hands. There's something comforting about rebuilding. Monks do a lot of mending. Walls, robes, broken pews, even the occasional weary heart. A pilgrim wanders by, pausing to watch you work. He has a broad hat, a patched coat, and a walking staff shaped like a shepherd's crook. He nods. You nod. Another meaningful exchange. In this world, nods are the highest form of literature. The wind picks up. A crow lands on the edge of the wall and stares at you with open judgment. You ignore it. You have seen worse critics in the scriptorium. Evening comes, soft and gray. The bell rings for vespers. You wipe your hands, bow once to the half-finished wall, and head inside. As the chant begins, you feel something strange. Contentment. You're cold, your knees ache, and your fingers are stained with crushed valerian. But somehow, you feel grounded. You are a monk. You live in cycles. You pray, you labor. You listen to bells that never quite sleep. And sometimes, you dream of cabbage. Evening deepens into the kind of darkness that feels like velvet pressed against your skin. Soft, heavy, and impossibly quiet. Somewhere beyond the abbey walls, a fox barks once, then vanishes into the underbrush. You stir from your cot, stretch just enough to make your joints click like a badly tuned harp, and prepare for Compline, the final prayer of the day. The chapel feels warmer than usual tonight, or maybe you've simply stopped expecting warmth, and now even mild drafts feel generous. You light your candle, walk the corridor in silence, and enter the nave to find a flickering glow waiting. The stone columns seem taller in this light, like ancient sentinels keeping vigil. You sit, you bow, you breathe. Compline is not long. It isn't meant to impress, just to comfort. The chants are softer, the shadows deeper. You chant the familiar words with barely any voice, more like an exhale than a song. Protect us, O Lord, as we stay awake. Watch over us as we sleep. You try not to think too hard about the part where sleep is still a few psalms away. When the final note fades, you walk the cloister once more, not out of obligation this time, just to feel the night. The moon is hiding, but the stars are doing their best. You pass the herb garden. The rosemary brushes your robe. You feel something like gratitude, though it might just be indigestion from the turnip stew. Tonight, you've been given a special task, watch duty. Once a week, a monk stays awake through part of the night to ensure that the fires are safe, the doors latched, and no mischief or misfortune finds its way into the abbey. You carry a small lantern and begin your rounds. The cloister is first. You walk slowly, counting your steps out of habit. The wind rattles the shutters gently, like a bored spirit hoping for conversation. You check the kitchen, dark, quiet, and smelling of ashes and spilled barley. A mouse scurries across the floor with the urgency of someone very late to dinner. You salute it with your lantern. It ignores you. You check the library, the stone granary, the gatehouse, All silent. All well. Here's your major historical insight for tonight. Monasteries often served as informal hospitals and places of refuge for the sick and the weary, even in the darkest nights of plague or famine. If you were poor, lost, or afflicted, you might find shelter at an abbey door, though it might also involve a bath, a prayer, and 3 days of oat gruel. Back in your cell, you record your watch notes with a worn quill. All is quiet. Brother Florian left his lantern in the latrine again. You do not elaborate. You finally crawl into bed just as the sky begins to hint at dawn. It's not sleep you're after anymore. It's the pause between effort, a moment to forget your aching feet, the persistent smell of wet wool, and the eternal question of whether Brother Petrus actually washed his robe last week. You close your eyes. You hear nothing. That's how you know the abbey still stands. The next day begins again. Of course it does. You rise slowly, still half asleep, and shuffle to the chapel for lauds. Your voice cracks during the second verse. No one notices, or they do, and they're too polite to care. After morning prayers, you're sent to the cellar, not the exciting kind with wine and scandal. This one is full of dried legumes and enough barley to feed a small army of slightly bored monks. You're helping Brother Ardo take inventory. He has a wax tablet and a frown so deep it could hold soup. You count sacks. You weigh bundles. You try to guess if a particularly shriveled bean is still edible. Brother Ardo says it is. You suspect he says that about most things. And now, your delightfully obscure tidbit of the day. Some monasteries kept trained cats, not just for catching mice, but as unofficial mascots. There's even a famous Irish poem from the 9th century about a monk and his cat, Pangur Bán, who hunts mice while the monk hunts meaning in texts. It's weirdly wholesome. Your abbey doesn't have a Pangur Bán. You have a mean-looking tabby named Gristle, who once stole a sausage and has never apologized. At midday, you visit the infirmary, not because you're ill, unless spiritual fatigue counts, but because the infirmarian, Brother Severus, is short on hands. You chop dried nettles, stir thick salves made from goose fat and sage, and try not to spill anything. A young monk comes in coughing. Everyone stiffens. Plague has been spotted in nearby villages again. The prior says to pray harder. Brother Severus sharpens his knife, mutters something in Latin, and starts mixing vinegar tonic. You both pretend not to be nervous. Historians still debate whether medieval tonics had any effect, or whether the smell alone simply scared the illness away. Evening returns. You walk the same cloister again. You notice a small flower blooming in the crack of the wall. It wasn't there yesterday. You consider telling someone, then decide it's better as a secret. You eat dinner in silence. Bread, lentils, and the lingering thought that Gristle the cat is definitely watching you from the rafters. As you settle into your cot again, candle flickering low, you realize something. You have stopped keeping count of the days. That's not a loss. It's a sign of belonging. You fall asleep not with a start, but with a sigh. The wind carries you down. You wake to birdsong, not the cheerful kind that makes you leap out of bed and greet the sun, more the confused chirping of a sparrow that doesn't realize it's perched on a monk's windowsill, shouting into your face. You squint. The sky outside your small window is the color of unwashed linen. It's morning. Again. You pull your robe tighter, splash your face with water from a stone basin, and silently hope that today won't involve bees, spoiled turnips, or Brother Oswin's confusing stories about angel sightings in the latrine. The Lord works in mysterious places, apparently. The bell rings. Lauds begins. You file into the chapel, chanting with your brothers, your voice low and a little croaky. Someone's slightly out of tune. You hope it's not you, but let's be honest, it probably is. After prayers, you're summoned to the guest house, a modest building near the edge of the abbey grounds. Pilgrims sometimes stay here, if they've bribed the wind enough to guide them to this remote corner of the world. Today, a small group has arrived. 2 older women in mud-caked cloaks, a limping man with a walking stick carved like a serpent, and a child who won't stop staring at your tonsure. You offer them a nod and a bowl of warm broth. Hospitality, after all, is a sacred duty. And besides, the broth is actually decent today. No floating mystery bits. You sit near the hearth, listening as the travelers speak softly about the road, bandits near the forest, a merchant caravan turned back by plague rumors, a chapel burned down after a lightning strike. You pretend not to listen too hard, but your ears are eager. Out there, beyond the walls, the world still pulses with chaos and movement. Here's your historical fact to tuck in your satchel. Monasteries weren't just spiritual centers. They were also hubs for travelers, messengers, and even kings seeking advice, shelter, or political leverage. Despite their vow of withdrawal from the world, monks often ended up deeply entangled in its affairs. The limping man asks for a blessing. You fetch Father Prior, who obliges with a prayer, a touch of oil, and the kind of silence that feels like something important is being said, even if you don't understand it. After the visitors are settled, you're sent to the storeroom. It's time to sort the dried herbs again. You discover a bundle labeled mugwort, which sounds like something invented by a sleep-deprived wizard. You sniff it. It smells like wet socks and pine needles. Apparently, it's used for dream clarity. You're tempted to smuggle some into your straw pillow. And now for your obscure cultural tidbit. Some monks believe that placing mugwort under one's mattress could prevent nightmares and even allow divine visions. Or, at the very least, make your dreams more memorable. Whether that's a blessing or a curse is left unresolved. You help Brother Everard pound it into powder. He sneezes violently and declares it a sign from St. Cuthbert. You nod solemnly and take one step back. Lunch comes. The pilgrims are invited to eat with the brothers, though, of course, no one speaks. The child giggles at the silence. You pretend not to smile. Brother Petrus glares at you like joy is contagious and must be quarantined. After the meal, you walk the southern path outside the abbey walls to gather kindling. The trees here lean inward like gossiping old men, and the moss clings to your sandals with alarming affection. You find a patch of mushrooms, edible, if you're feeling brave, and pocket a few. Dinner could always use a little mystery. As you return, you pass the old orchard. Half the trees are barren now. Disease, drought, time, it takes its pick. But one tree, the crooked one near the back, still has a few stubborn pears clinging to its branches. You make a mental note to come back tomorrow with a ladder and a justifiable excuse. Back inside, you help repair an old psalter whose cover is falling apart. You rebind it with care, your fingers tracing over letters that someone, centuries ago, had copied by hand under the same flickering light. There's something reverent in that, a quiet continuity. As evening falls, the child from the pilgrim group runs up and hands you a rock. It's round and smooth, with a stripe of red clay through the middle. You thank her. She says nothing, just grins and runs off. You put it beside the heart-shaped one on your windowsill. You're developing a collection, apparently. The night creeps in like a soft blanket. Vespers rings. You chant. You sit. You watch a moth do battle with a candle and lose heroically. Back in your cell, you wrap yourself in your blanket. Listen to the wind tapping at the shutters, and let the ache in your feet drift upward like incense. Sleep finds you. Eventually, you wake before the bell. Not because you're particularly holy today, but because Gristle the cat is asleep on your chest, snoring faintly, and you're too confused to move. You stare at him. He blinks once, yawns in your face, and hops down with the casual arrogance of an animal that pays no tithe and contributes nothing to the liturgy. You sit up. The sky is still clinging tonight, but the hint of light is enough to convince your body that it's time to move again. So you do. The bell rings. You're already halfway to the chapel by then, robe flapping gently behind you like a tired sail. Morning prayers begin. The chants echo through the space, soft and steady. Today, the notes fall in the right places. Even Brother Oswin manages to stay on pitch, which feels like a small miracle. You decide not to mention it. Celebrating might break the spell. After lauds, you're asked to assist with one of the more prestigious, but often dreaded duties. Copying legal documents for the local abbot's correspondence. You were hoping for gardening, maybe even stable mucking. But no, today, it's ink and Latin and absolutely no room for creative interpretation. You take your seat in the scriptorium, arrange your tools, and prepare your soul for extreme boredom. Brother Cadric, who supervises the task, gives you a nod that says, "One smudge, and I'll send you to the goose pens." You nod back with your most obedient face. You copy the letters carefully. They concern land boundaries, sheep disputes, and a complaint from a nearby noble that someone's monks are stealing his apples. They are, but he can't prove it. Today's historical fact. Medieval monasteries acted as administrative centers for surrounding regions, often serving as record-keepers, mediators, and scribes for secular authorities. If someone needed a contract drawn up or a dispute settled, odds were good it would be a monk who handled it, and likely with better handwriting than most lawyers today. The weird cultural detail: there's a rumor that one monastery near York encoded small jokes into their Latin records by choosing obscure synonyms that rhymed with certain vegetables. Dominus Rudicus, for example, was not a real nobleman. He was a beat. The beat joke survived 2 centuries before someone finally translated it. Academics were not thrilled. Back in the scriptorium, your hand cramps by the 4th document. You stretch, ink-stained and bleary-eyed, then resume copying, channeling all the spiritual focus of a man who once fell asleep in mid-psalm and woke up still humming. At midday, you're granted a brief reprieve. Free study hour. This sounds lofty. It usually just means reading something you're not forced to transcribe. Today, you choose a book of natural remedies written in a hand so messy it's practically an inkblot test. You learn that steeped nettles are good for joint pain, but might also invite unwanted humors of the spleen. You nod solemnly, pretending you know what that means. Lunch is a quiet affair. Barley stew, hard bread, and water flavored with a hint of dried pear, which is generous considering the pear may have been more aspirational than physical. Brother Everard breaks a tooth on his crust. No one reacts. After the meal, you're invited to walk with Father Prior along the abbey grounds, a rare moment of shared conversation. He speaks in a slow, steady rhythm, pointing to different buildings as he reminisces about the time a lightning strike melted the bell tower cross, or when a deer wandered into the chapel mid-sermon and refused to leave. You mostly nod, absorbing the warmth of the sun and the way the wind lifts the edge of your robe like an absent-minded blessing. You ask a quiet question about the future. He answers with a parable about a donkey, a cart of salt, and a river. You're not sure what it means, but it sounds wise, and you appreciate the effort. Later in the day, you find yourself tasked with another round of bee-tending. The hives are quiet today, humming softly. You refill the water bowls, check the frames, and whisper a line from a psalm, not because the bees care, but because it fills the silence better than your thoughts. One bee lands on your thumb and lingers. You stare at each other. It flies away. You feel slightly improved. Evening arrives on the breath of a cool breeze. You gather herbs, mint thyme, something called bonewort, and carry them to Brother Severus in the infirmary. He grunts approval. You think that might be his version of thank you. You stop at your cell before Vespers. You place a small leaf of mint on your windowsill, next to the rock collection. The child pilgrim and her group have already left, but the stone she gave you feels a bit warmer every time you touch it. Vespers comes. The chants float more gently tonight. The light falls in gold slants across the stone floor. You sit still long after the final amen, not ready to leave the silence. And when you finally lie down, the straw poking at your back feels almost comforting. You fall asleep wondering how many other monks are out there, in other cloisters, counting the same stars. The dream this time is of bread, not the hard, slightly scorched barley loaf you gnawed at last week, but something softer, warm, a miracle with a crust. You are just about to break it open when the bell rings. You swear, softly and silently, in your mind only. Then you repent, also silently. The morning is thick with mist, the kind that blurs the boundary between land and sky, the kind that seeps into your robe and gives you the sudden, undeniable awareness that you are, once again, awake inside the 14th century. You rise from your straw cot with the grace of a much older man. Your knees have taken a vow of resistance. The stone floor greets your feet like a disapproving uncle. You light the stub of your candle and breathe in the scent of wax, dust, and sleep's evaporation. The bell continues. Lauds awaits. The chapel is already filling with quiet feet and woolen shadows. You find your usual place. Not too close to the altar, dangerously pious. Not too far in the back, suspiciously slothful. Just comfortably anonymous in the second row. You begin chanting. The words come like water from a slow stream, familiar, murmured, slightly uneven. A few monks are still clearing their throats. One sneezes in Latin. This morning's psalms seem longer. Or maybe your attention is shorter. You think about bees, about mushrooms, about whether Brother Cadric still hides dried figs behind the icon of St. Balthazar. After lauds, there is no task waiting for you. A rarity, a luxury. You linger near the cloister garden, hoping to be assigned something pleasant like trimming herbs or copying the Gospel of Luke again. But instead, the prior gestures toward the granary. Of course, there's been a spill. You follow the path behind the abbey, where two startled novices have already managed to append a sack of barley across the floor. The grains glint like gold in the low light. Beautiful. If you weren't the one handed the broom, you sweep. Slowly, thoroughly, meditatively, like a monk who believes that salvation might be found between the cracks of a floorboard. Here's today's important historical morsel. Grain storage was a matter of survival in medieval monasteries. A single infestation or leak could ruin the food supply for months. Granaries were built raised from the ground, with airflow beneath and tight stone walls to keep out rats, damp, and divine wrath. Brother Hugo, passing by, mentions the infamous infestation of 1318, where a rat reportedly the size of a goose terrorized the storeroom until a particularly zealous novice whacked it with a candlestick and claimed martyr status for his robe. You think he might be exaggerating, or perhaps romanticizing his own youth. You finish sweeping. The barley is returned to its sack. Well, most of it. You pour the unusable remnants into a basket for the pigs. They are, after all, not picky theologians. On your way back, you pass by the bakery, where Brother Martel is pounding dough with the kind of aggression that suggests he has unresolved doctrinal frustrations. You offer to help. He shrugs and motions for you to shape the loaves. The dough is coarse, heavy with barley and oats. It resists your fingers. You shape it anyway. This, too, is a kind of prayer. While you work, Brother Martel mutters something about divine gluten. You pretend not to hear. Today's curious cultural tidbit? In some abbeys, monks shaped loaves into sacred symbols, crosses, fish, even the occasional lamb. One particularly eccentric prior in northern Italy insisted his monks make angel-shaped bread, though most of them looked more like startled chickens. Artistry was not part of the vow. You finish forming the dough, score the tops with your dull knife, and slide the loaves into the brick oven, where the heat curls like an animal sleeping in its den. You sit nearby on a wooden bench and wait. The warmth is divine. You lean back and let your thoughts drift. You think of your mother. You think of the first time you tasted honey. You think of the first day here. How you wept during Compline because it all felt so hollow. You no longer cry during prayers. You're not sure if that's growth or surrender. The bread comes out darker than expected, but edible. Brother Martel grunts in approval. You take your loaf back to your cell, tear a piece off, and eat it slowly. It's still warm. Later, during terce, you feel the bread settle in your belly like a soft stone. Nourishment, stability, a small victory. Afterward, you're given another unexpected assignment, reading to the novices. Apparently Brother Oswin has lost his voice, possibly due to excessive lecture shouting, and the prior needs someone to fill in. You enter the small schoolroom. 10 novices, all wide-eyed and freshly shaved, sit on low benches with slates and blank expressions. You open the Book of Hours, begin reading. The Latin rolls out slowly, but your voice has found a rhythm, a kind of soothing drone that's more lullaby than lesson. One novice dozes off. You let him. That, too, is learning. Halfway through the reading, you improvise a pause and tell a story from your own novice days. A harmless one about how you once mistook Father Prior's wine for vinegar and nearly choked during Vespers. The novices giggle behind their hands. You pretend to scowl. They sit straighter afterward. You end with a simple line from the rule of St. Benedict. Let all guests be received like Christ. Then you close the book and nod. After class, you walk alone along the perimeter of the abbey wall. The weather is shifting. A breeze stirs the leaves. You pause beneath the crooked pear tree and see, to your surprise, two ripened fruits dangling just within reach. You take one, not as a thief, but as a witness. You bite in. It's tart, real, alive. You chew slowly, watching the wind move the long grass at the edge of the world. Evening prayers await. You head back in silence, dusting pear juice from your robe. Evening unfurls like a worn-wool cloak, slowly wrapping the abbey in softness and shade. The sky is heavy with the color of pewter, the kind that promises a quiet rain, but delivers only cool stillness. You walk toward the chapel for vespers, your steps automatic now, carved into habit. The same path, the same stones, the same patch of moss you always avoid because it's slipperier than sin. Inside, the candles are already lit. Their flickering casts long shadows on the walls, turning saints into giants and apostles into silhouettes. You take your place. You chant. You close your eyes for a few moments, not in sleep, just in surrender. The words of the Psalms pass through your lips and into the air like breath on glass, barely visible, instantly gone. Still you say them. That is the way of the monastery. Repetition not for novelty, but for depth. After prayers, the prior rises with a slow, deliberate motion and announces something rare. A visiting abbot will arrive tomorrow. There's a murmur, silent of course, but you feel the shift in the room. A visitor means cleaning, rearranging, looking holier than usual. You briefly consider brushing your robe for the first time in 2 weeks, then decide against it. You'll rely on charm. You return to your cell to find a small surprise. Someone has left a folded scrap of parchment on your cot. Inside is a rough charcoal drawing, a donkey with wings and a halo, balancing a loaf of bread on its back. Underneath it says, "Blessed be the holy burden bearer." There's only one person with that kind of humor, Brother Florian. You chuckle, silently of course. Laughter after vespers is not forbidden, just spiritually discouraged. You tuck the drawing between the pages of your psalter and make a note to thank him with a pear. Tonight, the silence feels less like emptiness and more like a pause in a story. You fall asleep quickly, but the next morning, the bell rings earlier than usual. You rise groggily, rubbing at the crease the straw has left on your cheek. A thin drizzle taps at your shutter, soft but insistent. The sky has turned the color of old ashes. The visiting abbot is already here. He didn't wait for the full sun. Abbots, it seems, move on holy time. You throw on your robe, tie your rope belt with a speed that would surprise your own guardian angel, and rush to the cloister to find the others already lined up. Robes mostly straight, faces composed in that neutral expression monks master over decades. Halfway between reverence and indigestion. The abbot is tall, with a beard shaped like a broom dipped in ink. His eyes sweep over your group like a ledger. He speaks softly, formally, with a cadence that suggests everything he says is both a parable and a subtle rebuke. You are assigned to accompany him on his inspection. Apparently, the prior believes you have a good memory and a calming presence, which is monk code for quiet and unlikely to say something embarrassing. So you walk, slowly, dutifully. You nod as the abbot comments on the grain stores, the layout of the scriptorium, the dryness of the fish pond. You say things like, "Yes, Father," and indeed, the barley yield has improved since spring. You resist the urge to offer him the rock from your windowsill as a gift. Barely. Here's your historical insight for the day. Abbots were not just spiritual leaders. They were administrators, diplomats, even political players. Some wielded more influence than bishops. Their visits were both blessing and audit. A spiritual tax season, if you will. You lead him to the herb garden. He pauses to sniff a sage and murmurs something in Latin that sounds suspiciously poetic. Then he compliments the neatness of the rows. You feel an odd sense of pride, despite having weeded only one corner last week and accidentally pulled up 3 medicinal plants in the process. He moves on. Later, during the midday meal, the abbot dines separately, of course. You eat with the others in the refectory, quietly, reverently. chewing your bread as if it contains the secrets of heaven. The soup today is thicker, possibly due to panic in the kitchen. Brother Renatus has added carrots. That's his version of a welcome banquet. You spend the afternoon polishing brass. Not as punishment, just as presentation. Everything that might reflect the abbot's gaze must shine. So you sit by the chapel doors, cloth in hand, rubbing the candlestick holders until your wrist protests. Brother Florian joins you halfway through, holding a long-stemmed feather and pretending it's a holy relic. "Behold," he whispers, "the sacred tale of St. Gusimus." You try not to laugh. You fail silently. It's okay. You're technically outdoors. While you polish, you share stories, not spoken, but traded in small glances, nudges, and the occasional raised eyebrow. Florian once made it through an entire Lent on nothing but cheese. You still haven't decided if that's an accomplishment or a confession. Your obscure cultural tidbit today. In some monastic circles, monks used elaborate, codified gestures for communication during times of strict silence. Over 150 signs existed in some abbeys, each for foods, chores, prayers, even phrases like, "I am sorry," or "Please stop stepping on my robe." The monks here haven't gone quite that far, but there's definitely an unspoken language. You and Florian just invented the sign, for this abbot is judging our soup. As evening falls, you are asked to assist with Compline, reading a short passage aloud before the final hymn. Your voice shakes slightly at first, but steadies as the words take shape. You read about patience, about the yoke of humility, about the lamp that does not flicker in the wind. When you finish, the abbot nods once. It's subtle, but to a monk, it's the equivalent of thunderous applause. Back in your cell, you sit by the narrow window and listen to the drizzle. You take the pear from earlier, slightly bruised, but sweet, and split it in half. You place one piece on the windowsill, just in case Gristle drops by. You eat the other slowly, thinking about candles, carrots, and sacred goose feathers. And when you lie down, the thought that settles over you is simple. Today was not holy because it was perfect. It was holy because it was real. The rain has a rhythm. It's not dramatic. It doesn't thunder or lash at the shutters like the wrath of heaven. It simply is a soft, steady tap on the roof tiles above your cell, like a tired scribe scratching at parchment. You wake slowly, without alarm, your eyes open to the faint silver of a cloudy dawn. The air smells of damp wool and rosemary crushed underfoot. You sit up and notice a familiar lump at the foot of your cot. Gristle. He's returned, curled in a perfect spiral of indifference, one eye half open like he's judging your posture. You stretch, yawn, and carefully swing your legs out from under the blanket, avoiding his tail. He does not move. He owns this space now. You wash your face in cold water that instantly rewrites your understanding of winter. Somewhere in the distance, the chapel bell rings for lauds, and you begin your day again. The procession to the chapel is slower this morning. The flagstones are slick, and your knees creak with all the enthusiasm of ancient wood. You pass Brother Petrus, who mutters a psalm as he walks, either for spiritual reflection or as a form of passive-aggressive commentary on your pace. You can't tell. You don't ask. The candles are already lit in the nave. The scent of beeswax mingles with that earthy, rain-soaked smell that seeps through old mortar. You kneel. You chant. You try not to think about the growing blister on your heel or the itch behind your ear you can't scratch without scandal. Today's psalms speak of endurance, of holding faith through the long night. You suspect they were written in a moment not unlike this one. A gray morning, aching joints, a curious cat, and a creeping sense that holiness is less about divine fire and more about showing up. After lauds, you're summoned, not by the prior, but by the visiting abbot. A rare honor, or a trap. He wishes to walk the grounds again, with you, alone. You try not to look startled. You nod politely, say, "Yes, Father," and wonder briefly if this is what it feels like to be promoted, or pre-buried. The abbot is silent at first. His long robes sweep through the dewy grass as the two of you pass the fish pond, the herb garden, and the rain-speckled gravestones of monks long gone. He stops at one, Brother Cormac, died 1322. known for brewing ale strong enough to convert pagans. He was stubborn, the abbot says, not unkindly, but he believed with both fists. You nod. The abbot continues walking. I watch your face during prayers, he says, after a pause long enough for a small rainstorm. You are either deeply devoted or profoundly distracted. You nearly trip on your own robe. You recover with the calm dignity of a man who just got spiritually roasted by a superior and is now considering taking a vow of invisibility. The abbot chuckles softly. It's not a rebuke. Monastic life is not for the mindless. Distraction means you still think. That's good. You nod again, this time less like a servant and more like a person. He tells you about his own novitiate, how he once fell asleep during vigils, slumped forward in the choir stall, and woke up drooling on his own psalter. The chant never even paused. There's a long silence after that. Not awkward, just full, like the air between verses. He stops at the outer wall and stares out across the fog-covered hills. There's talk of war again, he says quietly. In the south. Nothing yet, but smoke rises even before the fire. You don't know what to say. You weren't expecting politics before breakfast. Pray harder, he says, but his voice is tired. You part ways at the cloister. He returns to his quarters. You stand still for a while, letting the wind pass through you like a thought you haven't had time to finish. Here's your major historical detail of the day. While often seen as isolated, medieval monasteries were deeply aware of the political and military events of the time. Kings sent messengers. Nobles sought refuge. Monks copied letters that shaped kingdoms. Silence didn't mean ignorance. And your cultural tidbit? Some abbeys maintained coded correspondences, using biblical phrases as allegories for political messages. The lion prowls the vineyard might mean a lord was marching with troops. The fig tree trembles might indicate unrest in a bordering village. Passive-aggressive spiritual espionage, if you will. You rejoin the rest of the brothers for manual labor after breakfast. You're assigned to the orchard this time, clearing away fallen branches and lifting the soaked nets beneath the fruit trees. Your hands grow numb from cold, but your mind drifts again, as it always does. You think about Brother Cormac and his militant ale, about the abbot story, about the pear you never finished, and the drawing from Brother Florian tucked in your book. The nets are heavy with leaves and rainwater. You lift them carefully, making a small pile of broken branches, one of which looks so much like a shepherd's crook that you almost keep it. But you don't. A monk with too many keepsakes starts to resemble a pilgrim without a destination. After labor comes terse. The chants blur a little today. Your voice fades in and out. You sit with your eyes open but unseeing, like a door left ajar. The visiting abbot departs quietly after the service, leaving behind a handwritten note for the prior and a sack of walnuts, which is about as emotional as goodbyes get in a monastery. Brother Kedrick reads the note and nods solemnly, as though it contains either profound blessing or strong opinions about walnut cake, possibly both. You spend the early afternoon in the scriptorium, though your hand is slow and your ink blotches once or twice. The prior doesn't notice, or chooses not to. You take a break near the chapel, where a sparrow has found its way inside. It flutters near the window, confused and delicate. You guide it out with gentle hands and a whispered chant. It leaves behind a single feather. You don't keep it. You watch it drift to the floor like a tiny prayer. By the time Vespers comes again, your mind is steadier. The sky has cleared. The candlelight feels warmer. You sing louder this time, not for attention, just so the psalm feels heard. Back in your cell, you find that someone, probably Florian, has balanced a walnut on top of your rock collection. You smile, place it gently beside the heart-shaped stone, and blow out your candle. The dark doesn't scare you anymore, because now you carry stories. And in this quiet life, that is its own kind of light. The morning arrives not with a bell, but with birds. They gather just outside your window like a chorus that's lost its conductor, chirping, warbling, and squabbling over crumbs of moss and bits of string. One hops directly onto your windowsill and looks at you with the flat-eyed boldness of a creature that knows it survived worse than monks. You blink at it. It blinks back. Somewhere beyond this miniature standoff, the bell finally rings, confirming that yes, this day has officially begun, and no, you will not be returning to that dream about warm bread and quiet forests. You rise slowly. Your knees feel like they've been replaced with wooden hinges. The stone floor is cold enough to remind you, quite aggressively, that you're still alive. You splash water on your face, tug your robe into place, and begin your shuffle toward Lauds. The chapel feels different this morning. Lighter, maybe. Or perhaps that's just the absence of the visiting abbot's grand robes and stern beard. The candlelight flickers gently on the carved faces of long-dead saints, and for the first time in a few days, you feel as though the silence is listening back. You chant. The psalms today are from a joyful set, though joy here is a muted thing, more of a soft internal warmth than anything resembling celebration. Still, you hear a few voices lifted a little higher. Brother Petrus actually hits the right note during the Magnificat. You mark the moment with a mental star. After prayers, the prior addresses the brothers. A merchant is due to arrive today, bringing cloth, wax, ink, and a rare delivery of salt. Everyone perks up slightly at that last one. Salt, here, is not just a seasoning. It's treasure. It preserves, enhances, and, for a few indulgent brothers, makes turnip stew tolerable. You're assigned to help receive the goods at the outer gate. It's a welcome change. Being trusted to interact with the outside world, however briefly, is not something given lightly. So after a humble breakfast, barley porridge, mostly congealed, you find yourself in the courtyard, watching the road. It's a muddy track, rutted and worn, framed by hedgerows now turning the color of rust. You pass the time plucking dried moss from the base of the wall and watching the clouds drift like forgotten thoughts. Then, over the horizon, comes the merchant's cart, creaking, swaying, drawn by a pair of shaggy, indifferent mules. The merchant himself is a squat man wrapped in too many layers of cloth, his beard braided with small copper beads. He smells faintly of cheese and ambition. He bows low and offers a cheerful Pax Vobiscum, then launches into a tale about being chased by bandits near the river, rescued by a priest with a crossbow, and how he once sold silk to a duke who thought it was wool and thanked him for the honesty. You nod politely and say little. You're here to count the barrels, not evaluate the embellishments. You unload candles, thick, fragrant beeswax tapers that smell like honey and quiet nights, then sacks of rye, lengths of coarse linen, pots of ink sealed with wax, and finally, a small pouch of salt, so precious it's tucked inside a box within a box, like a secret. Here's your historical fact of the day. Salt was so valuable in medieval Europe that it was sometimes used as currency, and cities with access to good salt routes became trade powerhouses. Entire wars were fought over it. Monks didn't just use it in the kitchen, they used it to barter, to preserve fish, to honor guests, even to sanctify holy water. The merchant is paid with a letter of credit, signed and sealed with the abbey's wax stamp, and a loaf of yesterday's bread, which he accepts with a smile that suggests he will be feeding it to his mule. He departs, promising to return in a month, if wolves don't get me first. You wave. The mule flicks its tail. You return to the storeroom to help catalog the new arrivals. Brother Ardo is already there, muttering over a broken ledger. He grunts approval when you tell him the merchant was punctual. You take the candles to the chapel, stacking them in the side alcove where light feels most sacred. Then comes the ink. You open one of the new jars and stir it with a thin stick. It smells sharp, like iron and damp parchment, a scent that reminds you of hours bent over scripture, eyes aching, hand cramped, mind fluttering between devotion and distraction. Later, in the scriptorium, you get to try the new ink. You write a single word, veritas, truth, on a scrap of vellum. It flows smoothly, evenly. A good omen. Your obscure cultural tidbit? Some monks believed that writing holy words with imperfect ink could allow demons to crawl into the margins. That's one theory behind why scribes added bizarre little doodles, marginalia of rabbits jousting or snails with swords. The absurd kept the darkness away, or at least gave it something to laugh at. You don't add a doodle today, but your tea has a little flourish. Artistic license. The rest of your afternoon is spent in quiet labor. You oil hinges on the cloister doors, sweep dead leaves from the cloister walk, and help Florian rearrange the infirmary herbs. He labels each jar in Latin and then again in his own made-up language. "This one's for head fog," he says, pointing to a jar of crushed mint. "This one's for heart heaviness." He taps the rosemary. You nod. You both pretend the labels are scholarly. At none, the chapel is quiet, almost empty. A few monks are out tending the fields. You chant the psalms mostly to yourself, your voice echoing softly under the stone arches. Afterward, you take a short walk beyond the abbey's walls, just far enough to see the edge of the nearby forest. The trees are tall and still, their limbs like outstretched arms holding up the sky. You pause by a moss-covered rock and sit for a moment. You think about the merchant and his stories, about the weight of salt, about how something as small as ink or a candle can shape the day. You pick up a smooth stone, round, dark, cool. You carry it back with you and place it gently beside the others on your windowsill. Now there are 4. Dinner is lentils, cabbage, and a small sliver of salted fish, a gift from the merchant. You savor each bite slowly, trying not to look too delighted. Brother Petrus glares at you anyway. He's convinced joy spoils digestion. As the final bell tolls, you return to your cell. The wind has picked up slightly. The birds have gone. Gristle is curled once again in his spot near your feet. You light one of the new candles. It burns steadily, quietly, with a golden glow that makes the shadows on your wall sway like dancers. You lie down, exhale slowly, and watch the light until sleep takes it from you. You awaken slowly, not from the bell, nor from dreams, but from the scent of damp earth drifting through your window. The rain has stopped at last, and in its place comes the gentle scent of the world exhaling. Wet grass, moss warmed by pale sunlight, the faint sweetness of early mushrooms. A moment later, the bell rings, as if catching up to your body's quiet decision to rejoin the day. You rise more fluidly than usual. Your back doesn't creak quite so loudly. Your knees are still protesting, but in a less legal-sounding tone. Gristle is absent from your cot, which you take as a sign that the universe, for once, intends to let you have the blanket to yourself. The morning light is soft and clear, one of those rare days when the world looks as if it's just been washed and hung out to dry. You dress, fold your blanket with almost ceremonial care, and walk toward Lauds, the first prayer of the day, with a step more relaxed than usual. The chapel feels bright today, literally and otherwise. Sunlight slants in through the stained glass windows, painting golden shapes on the flagstone floor. The dust motes dance in it, like a choir of tiny saints, briefly illuminated and wholly indifferent to your presence. The chants are crisp. The psalms today speak of praise and trust, of mercy rising, like dew from the morning earth. You catch yourself smiling at the coincidence. Or maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe whoever assigned this week's readings peeked out the window first, after lauds and a brief meal, rye bread and a few shriveled figs. As a treat, you receive your task for the day. Field duty. You blink. Field duty is a rare assignment for you. Usually, it's given to the stronger brothers, or the novices who need humbling via mud and blisters. But perhaps today the prior is feeling whimsical, or perhaps you're being punished for whatever that flourish was in yesterday's gospel copy. You change into your work robe, grab a worn hoe from the tool shed, and follow Brother Ambrose down the slope past the fish pond, beyond the orchard, to the tilled plots where cabbages, beans, and barley attempt to grow under skies that can't decide between blessing and indifference. Ambrose says nothing as you walk. He's a large man with the personality of a stone wall, useful, solid, and only occasionally lichen-covered. You appreciate his silence. It pairs well with yours. You're assigned the barley row. The weeds have grown brazen with the recent rain, so you set to work gently disturbing their ambitions. The sun warms your back. Birds flutter from tree to tree. A squirrel eyes your rope belt with entirely too much interest. It's hard work, honest work, the kind of labor that makes you sweat in places that feel vaguely unmonastic. But there's a rhythm to it. Dig, pull, clear, breathe. That's almost meditative. Time slows. Or maybe you slow. Either way, The hours stretch out like a plain hymn, long and even. Here's your historical fact for the morning. Monks were not merely spiritual men. They were also farmers, builders, brewers, and beekeepers. The rule of Saint Benedict insisted on ora et labora, prayer and work. The work was not a distraction from holiness. It was holiness. Every weed pulled, every row straightened, every callus earned was a form of discipline, a slow carving of the soul into something useful. Brother Ambrose pauses around midday and pulls out a small parcel from his robe, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth, and a half-rotten apple. He offers you the cheese. You hesitate for only a moment before accepting. It's pungent, chalky, and alarmingly potent. You chew carefully. Holiness, you remind yourself, takes many forms. As you eat in the quiet of the barley field, a bee lands on your sleeve. You stay still. It walks a few slow steps across the fold of your robe, then lifts into the air and drifts away. You think about your stones. You've been collecting them for weeks now, small, smooth things, each one tied to a moment. The heart-shaped one from your first solo task, the striped red stone from the child pilgrim, the pebble you picked up by the orchard, still slightly scented with pear. They're not relics. They're reminders that even here, in this life of sameness and silence, days are different. Memory is still allowed. Quietly, tucked into a windowsill. After the meal break, you work another 2 hours before you and Ambrose are dismissed. He grunts once in farewell, which is as good as a handshake in his dialect. Back at the Abbey, you pass by the kitchen, where Brother Renatus is boiling something that smells like repentance. You peek in. He nods. You nod. You both pretend you don't see the smoke curling out of the pot like a warning. Then comes terse, and after that, a brief meeting with the prior in the cloister. He wants to know if you've been content. The question startles you, not because it's invasive, but because it's rare. Monks aren't often asked how they feel. The life assumes certain answers, but the prior waits. You answer slowly. Yes, some days, more than others. He smiles. That's already more than most. He mentions that a new novice is due to arrive next week. Young, sent by his mother, apparently. You remember what that felt like. The disorientation, the ache, the hours spent pretending you understood the schedule. The relief when someone quietly handed you an extra blanket without saying a word. The prior asks if you'll show him around. Be his guide. You nod. You don't even hesitate. After the meeting, you head to the scriptorium. The others are finishing up today's copying, but you sit at your desk with a blank piece of vellum. You ink your quill. Then, instead of copying scripture, you begin writing something else. A list of sounds in the monastery. The bell, the hiss of candles, the creak of sandals in the hallway, the way Brother Florian sighs before every chant, rain on the roof, the way silence settles after laughter is swallowed. You don't know why you're writing this, only that it feels right. You tuck the page into the back of your psalter, where only you will see it. At Vespers, your voice is steady. Your back is sore, your hands are stained with earth, and you are strangely, quietly at peace. After the final bell, you sit in your cell and turn the newest stone over in your hand, the one from the barley field. It's light, speckled with tiny flecks of mica. It glints in the candlelight. You place it beside the others. 5 now. 5 small weights holding down the corners of your world. You blow out the candle, and sleep comes quickly, like it's been waiting all day just for you. You wake to mist. Not rain, not dew mist. That in-between weather that makes the world feel like it hasn't quite committed to being real yet. Outside your window, everything is softened. The roof lines, the chapel spire, even the orchard trees, which look like ghostly dancers reaching through fog. For a moment, you just sit and breathe. The air smells like wet stone and lavender. Someone must have passed by with a fresh bundle for the infirmary. Gratefully, Gristle is nowhere in sight. You light your candle. The flame sputters for a second, then steadies. It casts a slow golden glow across the stones on your windowsill. You trace their outlines with your eyes, each one tied to a day, a task, a passing thought. They don't speak, but they've begun to feel like companions. The bell rings. Lauds, you walk to the chapel half awake. Your body moves on muscle memory, like the steps are written into your spine now. The chant begins before you're even fully aware of it. Your voice joining the others, like a stream flowing into a river. Today's psalms are full of gratitude. You find yourself meaning the words more than usual. After prayers, you're given a task you haven't done in weeks, helping in the library. The Abbey's library is modest, tucked behind the scriptorium and up a narrow spiral staircase that smells like candle smoke and dust. But it's one of your favorite places. The air here is always a few degrees cooler, like the weight of the books has its own climate. You meet Brother Salvius, the librarian, hunched and ancient, with a beard that seems to whisper stories of its own. He grunts when he sees you. Good, you're quiet. That's the only qualification required. He hands you a list, books to retrieve, scrolls to untangle, a shelf to dust. You begin with the easiest task, reshelving Homiliae and Evangelia, which someone left open to a page about wheat and spiritual hunger. You carefully brush the edges with a rabbit hair brush and slide it back into its rightful home. Then comes a scroll. This one is older, wrapped in a cracked leather binding and tied with a string that looks more ceremonial than functional. You untie it. It smells of ancient glue and something vaguely medicinal. The writing is cramped and dark. You recognize a few words: pluvia, terra, reliqui, rain, earth, remains. It's a weather record, or maybe an agricultural account, or maybe a lament disguised as data. Historians still debate whether these monastic scrolls were practical or poetic. You lean toward the latter. While you work, Brother Salvius mutters in the corner, reading aloud from a treatise on divine geometry. You pick up fragments between your tasks. The number 3 is perfection, as in Father, Son, and Spirit. 7. The days of creation. 12 for the tribes, for the apostles. And somewhere softly, almost inaudibly. And 4 is the number of stones a monk should have before he begins to worry. You look over your shoulder. He doesn't smile, but his eyes twinkle with mischief. You suppress your grin. Barely. Here's your historical anchor for the morning. Monastic libraries weren't just spiritual archives. They were centers of knowledge, preserving classical texts, medical treatises, and scientific theories. Some abbeys held the only surviving copies of Roman and Greek works. A sleepy monk with a dull quill may have saved more culture than 100 kings. Your odd cultural tidbit today. Some monks developed a superstition that books could remember the sins of the scribe who copied them. That's why some manuscripts end with apologies or prayers. May God forgive the errors of this work and its maker. The margins weren't just for doodles. They were a spiritual hedge against eternity. You spend 3 full hours in the library. When you emerge, blinking into the brighter hallway light, it feels like you've surfaced from deep water. You take lunch outside today. The mist has lifted, and the cloister garden smells like green things. You sit near the thyme bushes and nibble your bread, which contains, surprisingly, a few walnut chunks from the merchant's last visit. It's not a feast, but it's close enough. Brother Florian joins you. He sits without speaking, holding a turnip like it's a philosophical riddle. After a few minutes, he sighs. I used to dream of being a bishop, he says. Now I dream of naps. You nod. The two are not mutually exclusive. The afternoon's task is in the infirmary, but not for medical work. Instead, you're helping clean the long cabinet of dried plants and powders. Brother Severus watches from his chair with an expression halfway between approval and suspicion. You dust each jar, read each label aloud, and reorganize them by frequency of use. Lavender, mint, nettles, sage. At the very bottom, a faded label, Terra Draconis, dragon's blood. You raise your eyebrows. Severus shrugs. It's not what it sounds like, but I let the novices think it is. He points you to a locked drawer in the back. Inside are records, parchments marked with illnesses, recoveries, and deaths. Neatly labeled, painfully thorough. You run your fingers over the names. Some you recognize. One you copied a psalm for last winter. You close the drawer slowly. Later, you find yourself wandering without direction. You pass the fish pond, the stable, the wall overlooking the distant hills. The sunlight is turning gold now, and a few clouds drift across the sky, like thoughts you haven't fully formed. You sit beneath the crooked pear tree. There are no pears left, just a few dry leaves clinging to the tips. You close your eyes. You think of the boy who will arrive soon, the novice, of how you'll show him the chapel, the scriptorium, the best hiding place for an extra candle stub. You think of your stones, your psalter, your unfinished list of monastery sounds. You think, I was once new too. You stay until the bell calls for vespers. The sky is orange. The wind has turned cool. You walk back with a steady step. You take your place in the chapel. You sing without thought, but not without meaning. And that night, in your cell, you light your candle. You write a small note on a scrap of parchment. Today I remembered why I stayed. You fold it, slide it beneath the smooth, speckled stone you found last week. Then you lie down and listen to the quiet. You wake in darkness, not the cozy kind of darkness, the kind wrapped in candlelight and sleep-heavy silence, but the vast, cold, early morning kind. The kind that feels like the world hasn't quite rebooted yet. You don't move right away. You just lie there, eyes open, listening. There's no bell yet. Only the sound of the wind nosing through cracks in the stone wall, the distant rustle of something small in the hallway. Rat or novice, impossible to tell at this hour. And your own breathing, calm but reluctant. This is vigil hour, the deep center of the monastic night. And today, you volunteer to rise early. Or, more truthfully, yesterday you were in a mood of spiritual optimism and told the prior you'd do it. That version of you is gone now. You envy him. You sit up and pull your robe around your shoulders. The air bites. Your candle refuses to light on the first try. On the second, it flares too bright, then settles into a dim golden flicker. You hold it steady, stepping softly across the stones toward the chapel. There in the dark are 5 others, 6 voices, including yours. That's enough. The chants begin slowly, softly. No one has the energy to sound righteous yet. It's beautiful, in a way honest. These aren't the soaring songs of high feasts or grand liturgies. These are the muttered prayers of tired men who still mean them, even with cracked voices. The psalms for this hour speak of waiting, of yearning, of watchmen on the walls and stars that do not yet fade. You don't try to interpret them. You just let them pass through you like wind through a field of barley. Moving, meaningful, quiet. After vigil and a brief Compline-style benediction, you return to your cell. The candle's almost out. The room smells of wax and stone and something faintly herbal. Your robe still carries traces of yesterday's time dust. You lie down again, just for an hour, and drift into a half-sleep, full of strange, quiet dreams. Ink that moves on its own, pears that speak Latin, and Brother Florian chasing a goose, holding the Psalter of Augustine in its beak. You wake again to the second bell. Lauds this time. This one more definite, more awake. The sun is rising now. Faint lines of light stretching through the gray. You rise. Again. A monk's day is full of risings. At breakfast, you find a surprise. Warm oatcakes, cooked over a newly repaired griddle, with a hint of preserved plum stirred in. It's not indulgence, it's economy. Someone discovered the plums were turning, and Brother Renatus hates waste more than sin. You eat slowly, savoring the tangy sweetness. Across from you, Brother Oswin is also chewing unusually contemplatively. You suspect he's having a moment of joy, but doesn't know what to do with it. No one speaks. A single oatcake can feel like a revelation in the right light. Today, you're sent to the gatehouse. A delivery is expected. Not food this time, but parchment. The abbey stores are running low, and the prior is anxious to have fresh vellum before winter. You sit in the small stone chamber by the entrance, wrapped in a second robe, watching the road. It's quiet, just the wind in the trees, the occasional bird, and the creak of the old gate as it sways ever so slightly. You check the latch 3 times. It's habit now. Repetition breeds peace. Around midday, the courier arrives, a boy of maybe 16, riding a weary-looking donkey and leading another behind him, its panniers bulging with tightly rolled vellum and 2 sacks of dried reeds for pen-making. The boy hands you a scroll. You break the seal and skim the Latin. delivered from a tannery near Blois. Paid in advance. No blemishes. No complaints. You offer the boy a slice of bread and a dipper of water. He accepts them like treasure. You also hand him a note back, Brother Cadrick's messy signature authorizing receipt, and send him on his way. You bring the parchment to the scriptorium. Brother Salvius nearly weeps with joy. He strokes the smooth roll like it's a long-lost sibling and begins muttering about how finally we can finish the canticles without resorting to old confession scraps. You help him store the new supply. Each roll is tucked neatly into the wooden case by the wall, sorted by size, texture, and, of course, smell. Some monks insist different vellums smell of different saints. You're not convinced, but you do admit this new batch smells cleaner, more hopeful. Today's major historical detail: vellum was a luxury, even for monasteries. Made from animal skins, usually calf or sheep. It was prepared through a long, laborious process that involved lime baths, scraping, stretching, and endless drying. Monks often spent days just preparing the materials before writing a single word. In some cases, entire books were made from the skins of over 100 animals. Your obscure cultural tidbit? A few abbeys kept a cursed page at the front or back of a book. Spells or oaths threatening divine punishment on anyone who stole or defaced a manuscript. One memorable example reads, "May the hand that steals this book wither, may his eyes darken, and may his soul be condemned to the devil with Judas." A bit aggressive, perhaps, but monks didn't play around with book theft. After helping Salvius, you wander into the courtyard where the sun is finally breaking through the clouds. The air smells of drying leaves and ash. You find Florian seated on the edge of the cloister fountain, sketching something in the dust with a stick. "What is it this time?" you ask. "A map," he says, "of the abbey, but only the parts where good things happen." You peer down. It's a mess of squares and curves, half-recognizable shapes. "There's the bakery," he points, "and that's the stable where the cat gave birth that one spring." "And this?" you ask, pointing to a star. "That's the corner by the pear tree where Brother Thomas told me a joke so terrible I almost laughed during Vespers." You add a new mark with your foot. "What's that?" "The library stairwell," you say, "where I once fell asleep standing up, and no one noticed." You both sit in the sun for a long time, saying nothing, mapping peace. Eventually, the shadow of the prior crosses the grass. You're reminded none is approaching. You rise, brush the dust from your robe, and walk to the chapel. This time, you don't sit in your usual spot. You move to a different stall, just behind Brother Hugo, who never sings, but mouths every word like he's casting a spell. You join in. The psalms feel familiar, but something about your voice sounds different today. A little fuller, a little more present. You think, "I'm not just living this life. I'm becoming it." Evening settles gently over the abbey. A few orange leaves drift down from the orchard as you walk the cloister walk one last time. You stop at the herb garden, pluck a sprig of mint, and place it inside your psalter, between the pages that describe the agony of Job. It feels like a fair trade. That night, in your cell, you add a 6th stone to the windowsill. It's small, dark, and perfectly round, almost like the dot at the end of a sentence. You stare at it for a long time before sleep takes you, with the certainty that tomorrow will come, and it will begin again. The rain returns just after midnight. You wake not to sound, but to its absence, some subtle shift in air pressure, some barely audible sigh from the wind, like the world has paused between verses. And then it begins. First soft, a gentle patter on the chapel roof, then stronger, steady, washing over the abbey with a rhythm that feels older than psalms. You listen to it for a while, lying still, the blanket pulled up to your chin. Rain here isn't just weather, it's presence. It seeps into the walls, the mortar, the wool, the very syllables of your prayers. It shapes everything. You drift off again, half dreaming of streams forming in the cloister, of floating candles, of Brother Florian chasing a runaway manuscript down a riverbank. It all makes perfect sense until the bell rings. You groan into your pillow, gristle, apparently startled by the bell. jumps onto your chest in a silent protest, then leaps off in a flurry of indifference. You mutter a greeting to him that is neither entirely charitable nor entirely untrue. You rise, dress, and light your candle. The flame dances in the draft, but you shield it like a guardian. The hallway is colder than yesterday. Your sandals slap wetly on the stones as you make your way toward Lauds. In the chapel, the air smells of wax and rain. You take your place and wait. One by one, the brothers arrive, robes damp at the hem, eyes still carrying the weight of sleep. You begin to chant. Today's psalms are penitential, full of longing and aching for mercy. They feel heavier in this weather, more rooted. The rain outside becomes accompaniment. You chant to it, with it, as if the sky itself is weeping alongside the words. After prayers, you make your way to the kitchen, where Brother Renatus is already at work. Today's surprise? A bundle of fresh leeks from the garden, somehow spared by last night's storm. He grunts approval and points you to the chopping board. You roll up your sleeves. You work in silence, slicing leeks into rings and dropping them into a large iron pot. They sizzle when they hit the fat. A simple sound, but satisfying. Renatus throws in a handful of herbs, thyme, marjoram, a pinch of something bitter, and nods. Stew by midday. Pray it thickens. You nod back, solemn as if the fate of the abbey depends on it. Then, with a flick of his hand, he sends you on your way. Your next task is one you didn't expect, inventorying the reliquary. Brother Cadric meets you by the chapel altar with a key, an old iron thing that looks like it was forged during Noah's third nap. You follow him through a hidden side door and down into the crypt. The reliquary is less grand than you imagined. It's a stone room, small, dry, lined with shelves and wooden boxes. But inside those boxes, tiny bones, splinters of wood, a single sandal strap, all labeled in precise Latin script. You help Cadric remove each item, checking its condition. A fragment of a saint's cloak, frayed at the edge. A vial of oil said to have touched the bones of Saint Blaise. A piece of wax shaped like a lamb, melted slightly in the last summer's heat. He handles each one with reverence. You do the same, though your fingers tremble a little when you hold the shard of stone labeled from the tomb of Mary Magdalene. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Faith has its own archaeology. Here's your historical fact of the day. Relics were not just spiritual objects. They were the lifeblood of pilgrimage, trade, and even politics. A powerful monastery could draw visitors and donations for miles if it had a relic worth praying to. Some were genuine. Some were hopeful. All were believed. Your obscure cultural tidbit? In a few overzealous abbeys, monks were known to fake relics using animal bones or even carved wood. Miracle splinters, they called them. There's a story of one monk who sold 4 separate knuckles of the same saint, whose skeleton was later found intact. Oops. After the inventory, Kedrick locks the door with a sigh and pats the key twice. You walk back to the upper level in silence. At lunch, the leek stew is surprisingly good. You savor it while watching the raindrops snake down the refectory windows in lazy rivulets. Brother Oswin hiccups during grace. No one laughs aloud, but 4 of you smile into your bowls. Afterward, you're sent to the bell tower to help check the ropes. It's a long climb, and the stairs are as trustworthy as Florian's bedtime stories. You reach the top breathless. The wind is stronger here, whistling through gaps in the walls. You can see the whole valley, misty fields, distant barns, the slow crawl of the river far below. The abbey looks smaller from up here, and somehow older. You run your hand over the bell rope, thick, frayed, slightly damp. You test it carefully, then ring it once, a low, echoing sound that rolls across the countryside like a yawn. Below, you see a flock of birds scatter from the cloister roof. You stay up there longer than necessary, just watching, breathing. You think about how often you forget to look up. You return just in time for none, slipping into your usual stall with rain still on your sleeves. The chant feels steadier today, like you've tuned into something deeper than habit, a harmony just beneath the surface. After the service, Brother Florian grabs you by the sleeve and whispers, "Come." You follow him to the cloister garden, where he reveals today's discovery, Mushrooms. They're small, white, and probably not lethal. Probably. He insists they go well in tonight's soup. You suggest maybe they go well in a sketchbook first, just in case. He agrees, reluctantly. Evening comes softly. You help light the chapel candles for vespers, then linger afterward to watch them flicker against the stones. The scent of beeswax and old wood fills the air. Later, in your cell, you write something new. Not a list. Not a psalm. Just a sentence. The rain was kind today. I think it remembered me. You fold the paper and place it under your pillow, where only your dreams will read it. Then you turn to your window and hold the seventh stone, smooth, round, the color of dusk. You place it gently among the others. 7 now. A sacred number. You lie down, and as the rain returns once more, you fall asleep to the sound of the world turning softly outside your walls. You awaken not to the bell, but to the unmistakable sound of singing, a lone voice, high and wandering, drifting through the morning mist like a thread of gold unraveling in the wind. At first, you think you're dreaming. The voice doesn't follow the cadence of a psalm or the practiced pace of Gregorian chant. It lilts and curls, rising on vowels too light for Latin. Then you realize it's coming from outside the abbey. You rise slowly, the sleep still clinging to your limbs like damp linen. You dress without thinking, muscle memory pulling your robe over your shoulders, tying the frayed rope belt around your waist. Your sandals are still slightly wet from yesterday's rain. You slip them on anyway. The air in your cell is colder than usual, but it's not unpleasant. It smells of pine and smoke, as if the land beyond the cloister has burned away the last of the night. You light your candle, though you barely need it. The sky is already whispering of dawn. You step into the hallway and follow the sound, past the scriptorium, past the kitchen, out into the cloister walk, where the rain has left shallow puddles reflecting thin slivers of light. There, standing by the outer gate, is a pilgrim. He's young, no older than 20, wrapped in a wool cloak patched with the colors of too many roads. His boots are worn down at the toes. On his back, a sack with a wooden cup tied to it, and in his hands a harp, small, chipped, cradled like a relic. He's still singing. It's not in Latin. It's in a tongue older than the abbey stones. Celtic, maybe. Breton. Something from the western hills and salt-licked winds. You don't recognize the words, but the meaning hums just below the surface. Brother Cadric appears beside you with a frown like thunderclouds. No instruments inside the gate. But before he can finish his protest, the prior steps into the courtyard. He raises one hand, not in warning, but in welcome. The gate is opened. The pilgrim enters, and everything shifts, just a little. The pilgrim is given a place in the guest hall, a bowl of warm broth, and a blanket. He says little, except that he's walking to Santiago de Compostela, though no one believes he'll make it past Rouen in those boots. He offers his harp in trade for shelter, but the prior declines. "Keep it," he says. "You'll need it before we do." You volunteer to guide him through the abbey for the day. Not officially assigned, just instinct. Or curiosity. He walks slowly, favoring one leg. You point out the chapel, the herb garden, the cloister. He hums a low tune as you pass the fish pond. Gristle, ever the opportunist, trails him with the wide-eyed suspicion of a cat-meeting competition for the first time. You learn his name is Yoan. He comes from Brittany. His father was a carpenter. His mother a healer. His sister lost to fever last winter. He sings, he says, because it's the only thing that doesn't fade. You nod. You understand. Mid-morning, you bring him to the scriptorium. Brother Salvius narrows his eyes, but allows him in. Yoan runs his fingers across the edge of a manuscript, as if tracing a map. "It's like hearing without ears," he says. He stops at a page of decorated capitals. "Your monks draw songs," he says, "even if they don't know it. You've never thought of it that way." He plucks a single note on his harp. The room stills. Even Cadric, who's never been moved by anything less than an excommunication, glances up. "For your historical reflection today, music, even in strict monasteries, found its way in, though instruments were often discouraged, particularly during solemn observances. The human voice was revered, and now and then Travelers, wandering minstrels, pilgrims, or penitent nobility brought songs from beyond the cloister that reminded monks they were still part of the breathing world. Your obscure tidbit? Some manuscripts were annotated with neumes, an early form of musical notation, even before staff lines were standardized. A few of these scribbled symbols have left historians guessing whether they're records of sacred hymns, or a monk's attempt at whistling his favorite tavern tune in disguise. You don't ask Johan where his song comes from. You don't need to. After terce, you and Johan walk to the orchard. The mist is burned off, and the pear tree stands leafless but noble. He leans on it like an old friend and plucks at the harp again. The tune he plays now is slower, quieter. You sit beside him in the fallen leaves. "You ever leave this place?" he asks softly. You shake your head. "Wanta." You think about it. The river beyond the hills. The sound of bells from distant towers. Fields of wheat taller than men. Cities with smells that never settle. Stories that change with every turn in the road. "Yes," you say. Then, after a breath, "But I'd want to come back." He nods. Then you understand. He pulls something from his sack, a small stone, black and smooth, flat as a coin. "From home," he says, and presses it into your palm. You place it in your robe pocket, beside the others. 8 now. Later, as you escort him to the refectory for the pilgrim's meal, he stops in the chapel one last time. He kneels. He doesn't pray. He listens. To the silence. To the space between candle flickers. To the weight of history pressing softly on the floor. And then he leaves. By evening, he's gone. Gone before Vespers. Gone before the next storm. Gone before you can ask what his last song was meant to say. But he leaves behind the echo. And a harp string, which you find beside the cloister wall the next morning, knotted in a loop. You place it on your windowsill beside the stones. It doesn't belong, and yet it does. The morning after Johan's departure is colder than it has any right to be. The wind cuts down from the hills with a bite that feels personal, slipping through the cracks in the abbey's thick stone walls as if determined to inspect every chamber, every corridor, every folded robe and half-finished psalm. You wrap your cowl tighter, but it doesn't help much. Even Gristle is nowhere to be found this morning, presumably holed up in the warmest corner of the kitchen, curled like a furry accusation against the idea of waking up. Still, the bell rings. Of course it does, and you rise like always. You pass through the cloister in the dark, breath visible, candle flickering, your sandals making that familiar wet slap against the stone. The stars are fading overhead, retreating behind thinning clouds. You can just barely make out the shape of the chapel roof in the dimness, looming like the ribs of a sleeping beast. Inside, the candles have already been lit. The waxy scent blends with old incense and cold stone to form what your nose now interprets as home. You settle into your stall and begin the chant. The psalms feel heavier this morning. Lines about endurance, long-suffering, fortitude. Appropriate. You try not to think of the harp. You fail, of course. After prayers and a modest breakfast, the bread tougher than yesterday, the broth colder, but the spoon mercifully clean. The prior approaches you. He doesn't say much. He never does. Just come. We have something for you. This sentence, in monastic life, can mean anything, from "You'll be blessed with a piece of dried plum," to "Please prepare the body of Brother Anselm for burial." You follow anyway. He leads you to the guest cell Johan slept in. It's empty now. Clean. The blanket folded. The straw mat shaken out. But on the small wooden table beside the cot sits a scrap of parchment, folded carefully, held in place by a small round pebble gray, veined with faint streaks of blue. You open the parchment slowly, your fingers shaking just a little. There are only 3 words, written in an unsteady, half-learned Latin. Cantus mene hic. The song remains here. You close the note and hold the stone in your palm. It's warm somehow. Or maybe your skin is just remembering. You carry it back to your cell and place it gently with the others. Now there are 9. Your assignment for the day is to assist Brother Severus in the infirmary again, though not with medicine this time. Today is inventory day, a sacred monastic ritual of checking every shelf, bottle jar, and scrap of rag. followed by labeling everything twice and arguing over whether a certain powder is gray or off-white. Severus is in a mood. He always is during inventory. You suspect he secretly enjoys the process, but would rather be punished than admit it. You begin with the herb jars. Lavender, dried and crumbling. Rosemary, still pungent. Ground valerian that smells like regret. You scrape out the bottoms of several containers and relabel them in precise script. Severus watches over your shoulder like a hawk in a habit. This batch of mugwort is too dusty, he grumbles. It'll confuse the novices. They'll use it for tea and see angels in their soup. You nod gravely. Would that be bad? He glares at you, but his beard twitches upward. You mark it as a victory. The second cabinet holds tools, bone saws, metal hooks, lancets, tweezers, cloth tourniquets. Some are clean, some are not. You wash them all regardless, not for cleanliness, but for history. These tools have been used. These tools have healed, or tried to. You pause at a tiny spoon, no larger than your thumb, for feeding broth to those who can't sit up. Severus says, quietly, I've used it more times than I care to count. You place it back with care. After a few hours, the infirmary is tidier than it has been all winter. The shelves gleam faintly in the candlelight. Severus grunts a final approval and waves you away like a king dismissing a very adequate jester. You walk alone after none, down to the edge of the woodline beyond the abbey wall. The trees are mostly bare now. Their branches form lace against the bright gray sky. The wind moves more freely here, uninhibited by cloistered geometry. You find yourself on the path Yoan must have taken. You follow it for a few hundred steps, just until the abbey disappears behind a hill. And for the first time in months, you're alone. You sit on a mossy rock. You pull out your psalter, but you don't open it. Instead, you take a small scrap of parchment from your sleeve, dip your pen, and write. I am not made of stone, but I carry them. You fold the note and press it into the hollow of a tree trunk beside you. Not hidden, not obvious, just waiting. On the way back, you find another stone. It's nothing special at first glance, mud-caked, dull, but you rinse it in the stream and discover flecks of green hidden beneath the surface. You carry it back like a prayer. 10 now. After Vespers, Brother Florian meets you near the garden. He has something wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it. The harp string from yesterday, now braided into a thin circle, tied at the end with a sprig of sage. For your window, he says. You raise an eyebrow. I figured your rocks could use a guardian, he says. You nod. They're heavy with memory. Aren't we all? That night, as the abbey sleeps and the rain whispers once again against the windows, you sit by candlelight and watch your collection. 10 stones, 1 string, 1 feather, and a silence that no longer feels like absence. You lie down, and the world breathes with you. The morning is clear for the first time in nearly a week. Not just the absence of rain, but the kind of crisp, blue sky clarity that feels like the world has been rinsed overnight. Light pours through your small window in thin golden streaks, warming the corner of your cell where the stones rest. They glitter faintly, subtle flecks of quartz, mica, hints of green and red in the grain, each one a quiet record, a proof of being. You sit up, slowly, blanket still wrapped around your shoulders like a second robe. Gristle is perched by the door, tail curled neatly around his paws, watching you like a silent alarm clock that only rings with disapproval. You nod to him. He does not return the gesture. Outside, the birds have resumed their negotiations with the sky. You can hear them bickering near the cloister garden, arguing over berries and twigs and morning sunspots. You light your candle and prepare for lauds. Today, the psalms are full of light, verses about rising, renewal, the day star awakening in the hearts of men. You find yourself singing louder than usual, not out of zeal, but because your voice feels comfortable in your chest, like a tool finally oiled. Brother Hugo is 2 notes behind as always. Brother Petrus clears his throat with theatrical volume halfway through the 4th psalm. It doesn't matter. The whole room seems a little brighter, a little looser. After prayers, you're given a task you haven't done in months, working with the bees. Brother Alwyn, the abbey's beekeeper, is waiting near the hives with 2 woven hoods and a handful of smoldering sage. He's a man of few words, fewer smiles, and an uncanny ability to be stung without flinching. The queens have been restless, he says. Too much wind. Not enough sun. You nod like you understand. You mostly do. The hives are located behind the herb garden, tucked near a low stone wall overgrown with ivy. The air buzzes with a gentle, constant hum, soothing, like a breath inhaled and never exhaled. You light the smoker and waft a gentle cloud over the first hive. The bees respond calmly, if somewhat judgmentally. Alwyn opens the wooden lid and carefully inspects the comb. It's golden and thick, honey glistening in the corners. You stare into the lattice of wax like it holds a secret language. Maybe it does. Here's your historical detail for today. Medieval monasteries were among the earliest structured beekeeping institutions in Europe. Honey was not just a sweetener. It was medicine, antiseptic, and preservation tool. Beeswax was essential for candles, and candles were essential for prayers. Monks prayed by light borrowed from bees. And your obscure cultural tidbit? Some monks believed that bees could sense holiness, that they would avoid a sinful man, or abandon a hive if its keeper fell out of grace. One legend even tells of a beehive that sang quietly after the death of a saint, mourning in wings what mouths could not. You help Alwyn clean the frames, replace damaged comb, and collect a small jar's worth of honey. It smells floral and earthy. You carry it back to the kitchen like a relic. At the refectory, the prior gives a rare midday address. The novice is arriving tomorrow, he says. A ripple passes through the brothers, half curiosity, half memory. You remember how your own arrival felt. Damp, disoriented, clinging to silence like it might protect you from your own fear. You remember being handed a bowl of broth and thinking it smelled like surrender. You remember Brother Florian whispering, "It gets stranger, and then it gets better." You've been asked to greet him. You already knew this, but the formal announcement makes it feel real. Later, in the garden, Florian walks beside you. You think he'll stay? He asks. You shrug. Depends. On what? On whether the silence says what he needs to hear. He nods, picks a blade of grass, twists it, lets it go. Still have the harp string. You nod. Good. The boy should see it. After none, you return to the scriptorium. Today's task is copying a homily from St. Bernard, one of the longer ones, full of analogies involving sheep, vines, fire, and the spiritual superiority of roots over flowers. You try not to lose focus halfway through. But halfway through, something catches your eye. A smudge. Not yours. A page already half copied by another monk has a blot of ink in the shape of a bird. Unintentional. Abstract. But clearly winged. You pause. Then, in the margin, you add a single curved line beneath it, barely a gesture. A branch, perhaps. A perch. No one will notice. Or they will and smile. Monks leave marks. We all do. Evening comes like a whispered secret. Vespers is slow, resonant, peaceful. A soft wind enters the chapel from the open slits near the altar, lifting a few tendrils of candle smoke. The final note lingers longer than usual, suspended in that strange quiet that follows a whole room deciding to stop together. You remain in your seat long after the others have gone, not because you have nowhere to be, but because you are already where you need to be. Back in your cell, the light is dim. You open your psalter and find a page where you tuck the harp string. Now loop gently around a sprig of rosemary dried from last month's gathering. You pull out the note from Johann. Read it again. The song remains here. You reach into your pocket and add the newest stone to the windowsill. This one is oddly shaped, long, thin, pale as bone. 11. The collection no longer looks like simple rocks. It looks like memory made visible. You lie down, but you don't blow out the candle right away. You watch it flicker, and you whisper something. Not quite a prayer, not quite a poem, just a breath of thanks. The flame steadies, the wind quiets, and you sleep like someone who's found the rhythm of their own silence. The novice arrives just after sunrise. You see him first from the bell tower, where you've been assigned for early inspection. From that height, The road looks less like a path and more like a thin thought stretching across the landscape, a suggestion rather than a direction. He's small. That's your first impression. Not short, but collapsed. Folded inward like a paper prayer in a palm. His pack is much too large for him, bouncing awkwardly with each step. He walks hunched against the wind, his robe too clean, his sandals too stiff. No creases, no stains. He looks like he's come out of a painting. You know it won't last. You descend the steps slowly. Let him reach the gate. By the time he knocks, Brother Cadric is already there to answer. His face a stone mask of procedural welcome. Name, he asks flatly. Lucian, the boy says. His voice barely carries over the wind. From a village near Rufiak. South. Purpose. Lucian hesitates. Then, quietly. To be still. Cadric stares at him. Then at you. Then hands him off. He's yours now. You nod. Lucian says nothing, but his eyes follow everything. The way you walk. The folds of your robe. The way your sandals slap against wet stone. You feel yourself becoming a mirror. You walk him through the usual. The chapel, the cloister walk, the refectory, the scriptorium. You point out the warmest corner of the infirmary, the loose floorboard in the herb garden, the best place to sit during vespers if you don't want the prior to notice you're nodding off. He says little. You remember that silence, the kind that isn't devotion yet, just caution. You bring him to the novice cell, a small stone room, a cot, a basin, a shelf, a window with no glass. He runs his hand along the sill. Cold, he says. It gets warmer, you lie. But gently. You hand him a folded robe, a knotted belt, and a worn psalter. He takes them like relics. Thank you, he says. Then, after a pause, will it always feel like this? You don't ask what he means. You remember that, too. No, you say. It gets stranger. Then better. After lauds, you walk alone to the garden. The sky is trying to decide between cloud and sun, like a candle wavering before it settles. You kneel beside the mint beds, pulling at weeds that grow too close to the roots. The soil is cold, wet, familiar. You think of Lucian's eyes, how they searched, even in stillness. You wonder what he's left behind. You find a worm coiled around a root. You move it gently, speak to it without words, then cover it back up. In the cloister, Brother Florian finds you. How is he? Afraid. Good. Means he'll listen. You nod. He asked if it always feels like this. What did you tell him? The truth. Florian smiles. Strange, then better? You glance up. Were you the one who told me that? No, he says, but I wish I had. At midday, Lucian is brought to the refectory. He eats in silence, sitting apart, but not alone. You notice how he watches the others, how he copies the way Brother Oswin bows before drinking, how he mimics the way Brother Hugo breaks bread. Not mockery. Learning. Brother Renatus sneaks him an extra spoon of lentil stew. You see it. You pretend not to. After the meal, you walk with Lucian to the fish pond. He looks into the water like it might speak. Do they have names? He asks. You think about it. Yes, you say. But we don't know them. Does that matter? Not to the fish. Here's your historical insight for the day. Novices in medieval monasteries underwent long periods of observation, sometimes years, before full acceptance. The vow of stability was no light thing. Once you swore it, you belonged to the abbey for life. The stones became your boundaries, your heartbeat, its echo. Some left before their trial ended. Some stayed out of fear. But some stayed because something inside them went quiet for the first time in years. Your cultural tidbit? A few monasteries marked novice transitions with ritual silence, not a vow, but an observance. The idea being, speak only when the words come from below your ribs, not above your tongue. After none, Lucian joins you in the scriptorium. You show him how to cut a quill, how to test the ink's thickness, how to breathe evenly before each stroke. He is shaky. The AS collapse. The TS stretched too long. But he keeps going. You guide his hand once. He doesn't flinch. By late afternoon, you've shown him how to clean the tools, how to wipe the knife, how to sand the parchment edge with pumice. These are not dramatic lessons, but they are sacred. In the right light, they feel like scripture. As you leave, you see him pause and stare at one manuscript on the shelf. The Psalms, illuminated in gold leaf. A lion in the corner, mid-roar. It looks alive, he says. It is, you reply. At Vespers, Lucian takes a spot beside you. He doesn't sing. Not yet. But he listens hard. You can feel it in the way he leans slightly forward during the Gloria. His hand rests over the psalter you gave him. He turns each page with reverence, even if he doesn't understand the words. After prayers, you sit in the cloister garden. He joins you again, wordless. You hand him something small, a stone. Not one of your 11. A new one. Smooth. Oval. Almost weightless. He turns it over in his hand. I found it near the fish pond. You say. Was waiting for someone. He smiles. That night, in your cell, you light your candle and look at the window. 11 stones. A harp string. A feather. A sprig of sage. And now a gap. A space. Maybe one day 12. You sleep with the sense that something has started. Not loudly, but deeply. The wind returns in the night. Not violent, just awake. It hums through the chapel rafters like a long breath held too long. Tugs softly at shutters. Coaxes the dried vines along the cloister wall into whispered, rustling conversations. You sleep lightly. Your dreams are thin, like parchment soaked too many times. In one, you're chasing a psalm across the field, and it keeps turning corners. In another, the bells ring backwards. You wait before the bell. You don't rise immediately. Instead, you sit up slowly in your cot, blanket still over your knees, and listen to the wind. A breeze like this means change, or at least the suggestion of it. You wonder briefly if Lucian hears it too, if he lies awake in his novice cell, wondering if he's meant to follow it or bury himself against it. The bell tolls. You rise, dress, step into the hall, your fingers already knowing the folds of your robe, the tiny worn knot in your rope belt where it frays. You pass Gristle, who blinks once at you from atop a half-empty sack of lentils, then returns to the sacred work of pretending not to care. The chapel is warmer than usual. The candles were lit early. Someone, probably Cadric, wanted to beat the wind to the task of waking the brothers. The flames flicker, but they do not falter. You take your seat. Lucian enters a moment later. His robe fits him better today. It's already a little wrinkled at the hem. You're irrationally proud of this. Signs of use are signs of staying. He kneels beside you. Doesn't sing. Doesn't move much. But he stays. You chant. The Psalms today are about anchoring, about faith like roots, about dwelling in the house of the Lord. You wonder if anyone chose them intentionally, or if the calendar simply knew what it was doing. After prayers, the brothers disperse as usual. Some to the kitchens, some to the stables, some to the scripture table. You're given a short task today, repairing the eastern cloister roof. It sounds worse than it is. The damage is minor, just loose tiles, wind-blown thatch. The kind of thing that would go unnoticed unless someone cared enough to check. Brother Ambrose hands you a ladder with the reverence of a priest handing over relics. You grunt thanks and begin your climb. The roof is slick, but the sky is clear. From up here, you can see across the entire abbey grounds. The garden already greening again. The fish pond still half frozen at the edges. The sheep grazing in slow motion. You see Brother Severus talking to the herbal apprentice near the edge of the herb beds. You see Florian napping behind the woodpile, arms crossed like a defiant saint. You see Lucian. He's standing near the orchard, alone, holding something in his hand. You can't tell what it is. Then he kneels, places it on the ground, presses his palm to it, not in ceremony, just as if to say, "You stay here. I'll come back." You feel something pressed gently behind your eyes. Not quite a tear, more like a shift. A tiny hinge creaking open. You return to your task, tile by tile, settling them into place like punctuation marks in a long sentence you're still learning how to read. After the work, you head toward the kitchen, where Brother Renatus has just pulled fresh barley cakes from the oven. He pretends not to notice you eyeing them. "You can take one," he says eventually. "I wasn't." "You were. You take one. It's warm, chewy, faintly sweet with honey. You close your eyes while chewing. Somewhere a bell rings. You forget which one. Lucian joins you a moment later, still carrying something. It's a feather, small, white-gray, soft as mist. He holds it like it might float away if he breathes too hard. I found it near the orchard, he says. Do I keep it? Only if it asks to be kept, you reply. He thinks for a moment, then nods. After none, you are sent with Lucian to the storeroom to help Brother Ardo count dried goods. A dull task, a necessary one. You both work in silence for a while, counting sacks of oats, jars of beans, blocks of salt. At one point, Lucian pauses beside the shelf of wax tablets. Do you ever feel like it never changes? He asks. You know what he means. Yes, that's the point. But what if you want to change? You dust off your hands. You will, but the walls won't. So when you do, you'll know it was real. He doesn't reply, but he nods. Later, before Vespers, he gives you the feather. For your windowsill, he says. You hold it. It's lighter than the others. You should keep it. You tell him. I already did, he says, smiling. Here's your historical fact for the day. Novices were not simply students. They were reflections, mirrors through which the monastery saw itself again. Their wonder reminded the old monks not to become stone. Their questions reopened closed books. Their missteps carved new patterns into well-worn paths. And your obscure cultural note? In some abbeys, senior monks passed down tokens to novices, simple objects with no official meaning, but personal gravity. A smooth rock, a carved bead, a scrap of embroidered cloth. They called them signa muta, silent signs. Small things. That said, I was here before you. You'll be here after me. And that is good. That night, Lucian sits with you during Vespers. He doesn't sing yet, but he mouths the words. You don't correct him. After the final chant, he lingers in the chapel while the others leave. You sit beside him again. There was a story back home, he says, that monks could speak to the stars. Could we? Not with words. You both look up toward the high windows. The stars are faint, but there. I think they listen. You say. Later, in your cell, you place the feather, Lucian's feather, beside the other. Now, too, your 11 stones stay where they are, but the feather shifts slightly in the breeze from the open window, as if acknowledging the new arrival. You lie down, wrap your blanket tight, and fall asleep with a quiet certainty. You are not the only one carrying silence anymore. By now, Lucian has developed a rhythm. It's not smooth yet, not the effortless glide of someone born to monastic life, but it's present, a pattern. His sandals scuff the stone paths in just the right places. His robe catches on the same bent nail near the kitchen doorway. He bows too deeply at the wrong times, and not deeply enough at others. But still the rhythm is there. You watch from a distance, like a potter watching a lump of clay decide whether or not it wants to become a bowl. This morning, you both rise early, earlier than the bell. No special reason, just that odd monastic instinct. Wake up before obligation has the chance to tap you on the shoulder. Outside it's fog. Not just mist, but full, cathedral-thick fog. A soft and silent ocean that has rolled in overnight and laid itself over the abbey, like a wool blanket. You can barely see the chapel from your cell. The bell sounds muffled, as if it too is unsure of where it belongs. You and Lucian meet in the garden by accident. Neither of you were sent there. Neither of you speak right away. You simply stand there for a moment, letting the white silence fill every corner. Then Lucian holds out a hand. Listen. You do. There's no sound, and yet the quiet itself seems alive, like the air is holding its breath, waiting for you to speak. Lucian smiles. It's like standing inside a psalm. You know it, a psalm before it's written. The fog doesn't lift all day. It folds itself into the abbey like an extra brother, showing up unannounced and refusing to leave. Some of the older monks grumble about it. Cadric claims it will rot the roof if it lingers. Florian says it's perfect for napping and promptly proves it. You are assigned a rather beautiful task, scraping wax from old candle stubs and melting them to form new ones. Lucian joins you. The work is messy but strangely calming, slicing wax into slivers, boiling it slowly, pouring it into carved molds. The whole room smells like bees and fire. You explain the process to him as you work. We save the old wax, the burnt-out parts, the ends that no longer give light. Then we melt them, mix them, and pour them again. Give them new wicks, new purpose. Lucian is quiet. Then, we're candles. You glance at him. I mean, he adds quickly. That's what we do here, right? Burn. Burn out. Get reshaped. You don't reply right away. Then, that's not wrong. The wax cools. You tip out the new candles. They're rough, uneven, but real. You both light one. The flame is small but steady. Your historical detail for the day. Medieval monks were among the primary candle makers in Europe. Candlelight was essential to their daily life, especially before dawn and after dusk. Beeswax was preferred for its clean burn and sweet smell, but it was expensive. Poorer monasteries used tallow, rendered animal fat, which smoked and stank. Still, they made do. Every flame was sacred. Your obscure cultural tidbit. In some abbeys, the first candle lit after Compline was believed to carry the last prayer of the night directly to heaven. Some monks would whisper secrets to that single flicker, entrusting it with hopes no confessor had ever heard. You wonder, briefly, what Lucian might whisper. You wonder what you might. At the noon meal, the fog creeps into the refectory through every crack. It clings to bowls, softens shadows, makes every bite of barley stew taste like memory. You look around at your brothers. Brother Severus is chewing methodically, eyes closed. Brother Oswin is praying between spoonfuls, as if trying to make up for yesterday's absence. Florian is fast asleep on his bread. You wonder how many secrets these men carry that have never passed through their mouths. You think about the feather Lucian gave you, about the small stone you found in your own bowl last winter and decided not to mention, about the single word you once scratched into the underside of the chapel bench, stay. After none, you return to the cloister walk. The fog is still here. Lucian joins you, holding a wax tablet. You raise an eyebrow. He grins, sheepish. I've started writing psalms. Bold, bad ones. You nod approvingly. Even bolder. He reads one aloud. It's short, strange, half-rhymed, but there's something in it. A rhythm you recognize. The same rhythm that has carried you for years. You don't praise it. You don't correct it. You simply say, let me know when you write one for the fog. That evening, during Vespers, the fog finally begins to lift. Not all at once, but slowly, as if reluctant to leave a good book unfinished. The light through the chapel slits shifts from gray to amber. The shadows return. The familiar geometry of the stone columns reappears, each one asserting itself like an old friend waking from a nap. You sing louder than usual. So does everyone else. Not because the fog was a burden, but because it left something behind. After the prayers, you find Lucian near the fish pond. He's holding a new stone. Found it near the edge, he says. I think it's for you. You turn it over. It's smooth, white, speckled with flecks of silver. You accept it silently. 12. You walk back to your cell, in quiet step. In the distance, an owl hoots. Gristle passes you in the hall, tail high. Clearly late, for something important. You reach your cell. Place the 12th stone on the sill. 12. 2 feathers. 1 harp string. 1 sprig of sage. 1 silence. You lie down. The candle burns lower. The stars return, faint but present. And you sleep without remembering the moment you drifted off. The day begins with rain. Not the thunderous kind that shakes rafters and hurls itself at window shutters like a sermon in mid-crisis. No, this is gentler, persistent, soft. The kind of rain that seems less like weather and more like a mood. A slow drip from the sky, as if the heavens are quietly weeping without needing to explain why. You don't mind it. The rain matches the rhythm of the monastery. Monks are used to slow things. Boiling broth. Transcribing verses. Waiting for clarity. Rain is just another kind of prayer, one that washes, not with words, but with patience. The bell for lauds rings a little late. Brother Cadric, it turns out. Forgot to wind the tower rope properly last night. You imagine him climbing the steps this morning half asleep, cursing himself under his breath, only to find the cord tangled like a fishing net around his ankle. You smile. Then you pray. Lucian is already seated in the chapel when you arrive. He's humming something quietly. Not a psalm, something older. Maybe something from before. You sit beside him. His humming fades, but he does not apologize. You don't ask. During the prayers, your voice falters halfway through Psalm 62. Not from lack of breath, from a memory, one you hadn't invited in, a path you once walked, a face you never see anymore, a small blue bead that someone once gave you before you took your vows, lost now in the folds of some other life. Lucian notices. He says nothing, but after prayers, he walks a little closer to you than usual. That is enough. Today's assignment is illuminating a manuscript. Not copying, decorating. You're handed a freshly scraped sheet of parchment, a pot of pigment, lapis, precious and sky bright, and a brush whose bristles are so fine they barely exist. Brother Petrus gives you a single instruction. Make the D look like it means something. You laugh. Then you begin. Lucian is there too, watching from across the table. He's been helping grind pigments, rose madder malachite, and something called dragon's blood that is definitely not what it sounds like. The mortar and pestle are stained like bruises. He watches you work on the initial. You draw a lion, not roaring, not fighting, just curled at rest inside the belly of the D, tail wrapped neatly around its own feet, a thin crown atop its mane. A lion of peace, a lion that sleeps because it is unafraid. Lucian leans forward. I didn't know you could draw. You keep working. I didn't either. Here's your historical insight for the day. Monastic illumination was not just art, but worship. Every letter adorned with gold, every creature curled in a margin, every blue sky painted with crushed gemstones. These were offerings, slow acts of love. Illuminators would often fast or pray before working, believing that beauty made holy things visible. And your obscure cultural note. In some traditions, monks would hide tiny, personal symbols in their work. A sparrow with a crooked tail, a tree missing one branch, a face half smiling in the margin. These weren't errors. They were signatures. Silent declarations. I was here. I saw this. I gave it light. You finish your lion. Petrus grunts with approval and says, "That'll do." You take that as high praise. Lucian asks if he can try. You let him. He draws an E. Inside it, a sleeping dog. It looks vaguely like gristle. At midday, the fog from yesterday makes a brief encore. It glides through the refectory windows, like it never really left. The barley stew today is thicker than usual. Someone added more garlic, possibly as a warning. Brother Florian says nothing the entire meal, but manages to fall asleep chewing. A remarkable talent. Brother Renatus takes a spoonful from Florian's bowl while he snoozes and adds it to his own. No one stops him. This, too, is balance. Lucian sits near you again. This time, you pass him a slice of bread without a word. He breaks it in half and gives the larger piece back. Neither of you speaks for the rest of the meal. It is one of the better conversations you've had. After none, you walk to the graveyard. It's not morbid. Monks visit it often, not because they're obsessed with death, but because the stones there remind them that even silence leaves echoes. You kneel beside one of the older headstones. The letters are worn smooth by wind and time, the name barely visible. Lucian kneels beside another. Do we remember them? Not by name, but by presence. Yes. A pause. Do you think we'll be remembered? You look out across the rows of stones. I think we'll be continued. You return to the scriptorium in the late afternoon, the rain still tapping gently on the windows. Lucian returns to his wax tablet. You see him erasing something, then writing again. You're curious. He shows you a line. It reads, "There's a silence that listens back." You blink. Then, "That's a good one." He shrugs. "It came to me in the chapel." You nod. That's where most of the good ones hide. At vespers, the rain slows. The clouds part just enough to let a faint amber light wash over the chapel floor. You see the stone glisten, like it remembers the sun. The singing is soft tonight, gentle, fewer voices, more breath. No one rushes. Lucian sings now, quietly, tentatively, but he sings. You hear his voice beneath yours, not polished, not trained, but honest. It wavers once. You steady your own pitch, as if to anchor him. You realize you are humming again, the same tune he hummed this morning. You both finish the psalm on the same note. It holds a moment longer in the air than you expect. That night, you return to your cell. You open the window wider. The air is sharp but clean. You place the lion-illuminated D under a folded cloth near your pillow. You place Lucian's sleeping dog, E, beside it. You stare at your collection on the sill. 12 stones, 2 feathers, 1 harp string, 1 sprig of sage, and now, 2 tiny scraps of painted parchment. You lie down. The candlelight dances against the ceiling like the last words of a song, and sleep finds you not like a thief, but like an old friend slipping in quietly, not needing to knock. You wake to birdsong, not a choir, not an anthem, just one solitary call, perched somewhere in the cold morning light. A finch, maybe, or a wagtail. Its voice cuts the silence not rudely, but with gentleness, like someone clearing their throat before beginning a poem. It's the first real sign that spring is coming. You rise without the bell. Your feet find your sandals in the dark, as naturally as breathing. The window is cracked open. The air smells faintly of turned soil, wet wood, and something sweet you can't quite place. Maybe thawing grass. Maybe the ghosts of last year's blossoms, trying to whisper back into the world. You dress slowly. Today is not like other days. You feel it before you step into the hall. Something is about to change. You just don't know what. You pass Brother Cadrick, carrying a bundle of cloaks. He nods, says nothing. His eyebrows are furrowed, which means someone forgot something. You make a mental note to remember everything, just in case. Lucian is already waiting at the chapel steps. He has that look again, the one that says he didn't sleep much, but he doesn't regret it. You don't speak, but he walks with you inside. The candles are already lit. The warmth is gentle. During lauds, he chants fully. Every note, every pause. He even closes his eyes. Brother Florian, sitting 2 benches over, raises one eyebrow, impressed, but trying not to be. You smile into your sleeve. After prayers, the prior himself appears. This is rare. He doesn't usually walk the halls before prime, but this morning, he glides through the cloister like someone with purpose, and an announcement. All brothers to the chapter house, he says, loud enough for it to carry. You feel a ripple through the abbey, like a thread being tugged. You follow. Lucian walks just behind you. The chapter house is quiet, damp. The windows are open slightly to let in the morning air, and the sound of crows beyond the walls makes everything feel more ancient somehow, like the stones are listening. The prior stands near the center, his white beard trimmed, his sandals dusted. He waits until all are seated before speaking. We have received a request, he says, from the village to the west. Everyone knows which one. Trevel, the one with the crooked church tower, the one that lost its priest last winter, the one whose roads flood whenever the sky decides it's had enough of holding back tears. They are in need of someone, the prior continues. Someone to assist, not to lead, just to be. He lets the words hang. No one speaks. Then Lucian. The room turns, all at once. You feel him stiffen beside you. His eyes widen. You've been among us nearly a year, the prior says gently. Your trial is not complete. Your vows are not yet final. But you have shown patience, stillness, a readiness. Lucian swallows. You will go for a season, the prior says. Take what you've learned. Listen more than speak. Serve more than teach. If, by summer's end, you return, we'll speak again. Silence. Then a nod. From Lucian. Then you realize you were holding your breath. You don't speak until after breakfast. The 2 of you walk together behind the garden wall, where the mint and yarrow are just beginning to peek out. I didn't expect that, he says finally. Neither did I. Are they sending me away? No, you say. They're sending you forward. Lucian kneels in the dirt. runs his hand through the soil. I don't know anything, he says. You know enough to begin. A pause. Did you ever go? You nod. Once. Long ago. Were you afraid? You think about it. Yes. And I went anyway. Your historical detail today. Monks were sometimes assigned to nearby villages as helpers, teachers, or healers. Not as priests, necessarily, but as quiet extensions of the abbey's soul. A listening ear. A pair of hands to carry firewood. A soft voice for last rites. A reminder that the cloister was not a wall, but a door. And your obscure cultural note? Some abbeys had a practice of marking such a departure not with ceremony, but with a single shared meal. Bread, honey, and silence. Not to celebrate, not to mourn, just to witness the shift, to bless the going with presence. That evening, the prior calls for such a meal. The bread is soft, brushed with ash honey from last autumn's harvest. You sit beside Lucian in the cloister walk, knees nearly touching. No one speaks, not because there is nothing to say, but because everything has already been said. Lucian breaks off a piece of bread, offers half to you. You take it. That is the blessing. That is enough. You walk him to his cell afterward. He's packed what little he owns. A spare robe, a wax tablet, a few leaves of scripture, a dried feather wrapped in linen. The one you gave back. You touch the doorway lightly with your fingers. I'll keep your window open, you say. He nods. Then, unexpectedly, he hugs you. It is awkward, slightly uneven. Smells faintly of mint and old beeswax. You return it. He steps inside. The door clicks shut, and the hall feels colder. That night, you sit in your own cell and do not light the candle. You let the darkness settle naturally, like dust. You run your fingers across the windowsill. 12 stones, 2 feathers, 1 harp string, 1 sprig of sage, 2 painted letters. You add something new, a folded piece of linen from Lucian's travel pack. Just a corner. Left behind intentionally, you suspect. You place it gently, and sleep with the quiet weight of seasons turning. The next morning arrives emptier, not quieter. Monasteries are always quiet, but thinner, as if one note of the daily chant has gone missing, and no one has adjusted the harmony yet. Lucian is gone. He left before dawn. No procession, no farewell, just a crunch of sandals on gravel and a flicker of brown robe turning left past the chapel. You didn't watch him leave. You listened to the stillness after he had. Now the abbey breathes around you, the way a body breathes after a limb has fallen asleep. Slowly, adjusting, remembering what weight felt like. You go about your day, scraping soot from the chapel lanterns, sorting dried apples into sacks for the cellar, listening to Brother Cadric grumble about the damp as though it were a personal insult from heaven. All normal things. But in each task, Lucian's absence hums beneath the surface, like a string pulled taut. At the scriptorium, you find a page turned down in one of the psalters. Psalm 134. You hadn't marked it. Neither had Brother Petrus. You know it was him. You recite it under your breath. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth. You smile. The boy had taste. Midday brings a surprise. The prior approaches you in the garden, where you are kneeling in the rosemary, trying to determine whether a particular stalk is dead or merely pretending. He speaks softly. There's a letter. You rise. In the library. He hands it to you himself, folded, tied with thin twine, and sealed with a thumbprint pressed into beeswax. Not a noble seal. Not official, but entirely his. You retreat to the cloister and read it under the arches. Brother, I didn't know what to say this morning. I still don't, so I wrote instead. I'm afraid. That's the first part. I don't know how to carry what I've learned here. I don't know how to be useful without you beside me, reminding me that patience isn't the same as passivity. But I also think maybe that's the point. Thank you for showing me how to be still without going numb. Thank you for reminding me that silence can speak, that it listens back, even when we feel unheard. I don't know if I'll come back, but I'll carry the rhythm of this place with me, the sound of your steps, the space you leave between words, the way you line up the stones on your sill. You taught me that some things don't need answers. They need presence. I'll keep my window open. L underscore. You fold the letter slowly. Hold it for a moment before tucking it into the sleeve of your robe. The rosemary does smell like memory today. Your historical insight for the finale. Many monastic letters were never kept, not because they weren't important, but because they had already done their work. The point was not record. The point was connection. A flicker of voice across the dark. A candle lit in one window, so another would know they weren't alone. Your obscure cultural tidbit. There are accounts of monks who, after departing for village service, would send back items instead of letters. A carved bead, a pressed flower, a piece of sheep's wool. Objects carried meaning far beyond words. They weren't mementos. They were continuations. You look around your cell that night and realize something has shifted. The room hasn't changed, but the way it holds you has. That evening, you add one final object to your sill. A piece of rosemary. Short, slightly crooked, still damp. You place it beside the 12th stone. The feathers curl slightly in the breeze. The painted E flutters. You sit with it all for a long time. The candle is already lit, but you don't rush. Outside, the last light of day drapes itself over the horizon like a blanket too big for one body. The shadows inside your cell soften. Even Gristle passes your doorway slowly, as if unwilling to disturb the hush. You breathe in. You close your eyes. And you whisper, not aloud, not quite, but enough for the room to hear. I'll keep my window open too. The world narrows gently, and rest enters like a slow tide. Now the day fades entirely. The last ember of sun slips behind the trees. The shadows that once darted along the walls now settle into corners like folded cloth. The stone beneath your bare feet is no longer cold. It simply is. Still, present. Your room is quiet, not empty, just full of stillness. Outside, the birds have hushed. The crows have long since flown. Only the rustle of leaves remains, like soft pages turning far above your head. The air smells of earth and ash and distant rain that may or may not arrive. You breathe it in slowly. Feel it settle behind your eyes. The candle's flame bends a little in the breeze from the window, but it doesn't go out. It never does, not tonight. Each object on the sill catches a bit of that flickering glow. The stones, warm and silent. The feathers, swaying faintly. The parchment letters, curled at the edges. The sprig of sage, still green despite the days. The folded cloth. The rosemary. All of it. Still here. Still listening. You lie back. Your robe folds softly around you. And as your body sinks into the straw mattress, your mind floats just above, hovering between presence and peace, between this moment and none at all. There are no bells tonight, no voices, just the rhythm of your breath, the echo of a lion curled inside a painted letter, the whisper of a psalm you almost remember, and the quiet certainty that you are exactly where you're meant to be. You let go, you drift, and the monastery, too, falls asleep, gently, completely.